I call the October 30th, 2023 school board meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. and we are in conference room C of the Fisher Administration Building at 12121 West 1st Avenue. Ms. Summers, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris?
Here.
Dr. White? Here. Ms. Willis? Here. Dr. Worley? Here. Ms. Heimer-Rolland? Here. Mr. Meyer?
Here.
Dr. Joseph Anger?
Here. We're in session. Thank you all for being here with us tonight. We are going to start out celebrating some really great things that students are doing here in Wauwatosa schools. The first is the Harley-Davidson Brick Bay competition. If you have not been following the district's social media, there's some really great images of this online on Facebook and I assume Instagram as well, and it's probably worth going and checking out. But congratulations to the students who submitted a variety of different proposals and are being considered. The students that we have that won this, there are 7 students that were selected as winners for the Harley-Davidson Brick Bay contest. Harley will be building a new community structure in downtown Milwaukee before the 120th celebration next summer. And students were asked to create brick bay designs the size of a motorcycle parking space using 4 colors of bricks. A total of 24 designs were chosen from local high school students, 7 of those being selected from Wauwatosa West. I will call the student names. If you're here, please do rise. And we would love to celebrate you, and we will have a raucous clapping at the end. First up is Brianna Alarcon, Valerie Cruz, Carter Gifford, Alexis Rognes, Madeline Sanchez, Ava Spruill, and Sawyer Vespala. Congratulations. We also have with us the Wauwatosa West Band. The Wauwatosa West Band, Dr. Means, can you speak to the competition and kind of big things that have been happening and continue to happen within Wauwatosa West within the arts and music department?
I think Mr. Hunt's here. Our band director at Wauwatosa West, Mr. Hunt, has been doing an amazing job. I had a chance this summer to come out and watch the young people practice. They put a lot of time and energy into it. There was a regional competition of marching bands that took place a few weeks ago. And the reason why we wanted to highlight the work of Tosa West is because over the last few years, they've continued to attend that competition and continue to rise in their performance. And it's not about where they place ultimately, but we're proud to say that they continue to place. And so this is the best performance that they've had. Mr. Hunt, why don't you come on up and take more about here, but this is the best performance that the Tosa West Band has ever achieved. And I don't want to steal your glory here. Why don't you talk a little bit about how the young people did at the competition and this great finish that they had a few weeks ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is our 3rd competitive season at Wauwatosa West. This is only the 3rd year that the band has gone out to competitions of recent years and started to compete. And so at the WSMA state competition that happened a couple weeks ago, there were 30 bands across the state that came out and competed across the day. And over the past 3 years, our score, as we talked about, has continued to rise and grow. And so we're just really proud of all the kids for the growth that they've shown. And this year at state, often scores can fluctuate at state because once you get all 30 groups across the state into one place, scores kind of delineate across all those different classes and stuff. But at state, we got our highest score yet, which was above a 70. We broke 70 for the first time this year at an earlier competition and continued to push into state. And our very first year, we placed 28th out of 30. Last year, we placed 23rd. And this year, we pushed all the way again into 18th out of 30 this year. So we're, just really proud of all the kids and their growth over the past 3 years.
I myself am a 7th grader, so I suspect that I will be sitting in some of these competitions and listening and celebrating. So congratulations to the parents who possibly like me, been listening to tuba for several years, or if you've got smaller instruments, congratulations. Jealous. I'm gonna name the students. If you are here, please do rise. John Vittori, Charlotte Berghammer, Eva Blackdeer, Brett Burgoyne, Ethan Bird, Landon Church, Cameron Carajo, Ian Crowther, Charles Andrew Cruz, Elliot Ingbrink, Maureen Fax, Mason Flickinger, Jonathan Fosterlin, Sean Gaius, Gustavo Gonzalez Sanchez, Milo Ugapian Smith, Jack Hanks, Aiden Harmon, Liam Hess, Sincere Hutchins, Adeline Jekels, Ava Kellner, Palmer Kriegoff, Max Kuhn, Aaron Leckman, Harrison Liang, Reagan Liebenthal, Vincent McMurtry, Jack Monagle, Michael Nebhard, Peter Nugent, Noah No, Madeline O'Donnell, Colby Oberdorf, Leanna Perkins, Rory Pettit, Riley Pribernow, Benjamin Rack, Bennett Brzezinski, Louis Schauer, Sophia Sherry, Emmett Strand, Casey Summerfield, Madeline Usberger, Jonathan Vang, Lang Wagner, Karaya Welch, Ijanya Wiley, Eliana Winston, Cody Shawn, and Braden Young. Congratulations. I look forward to hearing about the great things continue to go on at West. Congratulations to all of you.
I want to thank Mr. Gala. He's here as well as the principal at Tulsa West. I think you referenced earlier, there's a lot of great things happening at that high school, and in particular in the performing and visual arts. And thank you, Mr. Gala, for your leadership in making sure that all aspects of student pursuits are honored and lived up.
Congratulations. Folks are welcome. Folks are welcome to stay if you would like. If you've got other things going on this evening, like band practice, you are also welcome to head out as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr.
Next up, we have 30 minutes of dedicated time for public comment. Mr. Morris is going to time this. As a reminder, public comment, you have up to 3 minutes, and I will start with taking public comment in the room this evening, run through several folks, and then shift to public comments online. If you haven't been here before, what we do is we ask if you'd be willing to share your name, and if you'd be willing to share your connection to the district and or that'd be appreciated.
Hi, I'm Deb Falk-Halleck. I have a comment about the October 9th school board meeting where the public comment policy was approved on a vote of 6-1. Mr. Meyer voted no on it. If I reviewed that meeting, and one of my concerns was the friendly amendment. That a friendly amendment was circulated, I believe, by the board president to only the board members. And then when it was discussed in the meeting, it wasn't on the screen. There were actually community members. I heard their public comments saying they can't see what is being changed. And there was a substantial change made in that friendly amendment. And that was the elimination of public comment at the end of school board meetings. And two of you referenced WSD, the Wisconsin Association of School Boards. And if you look on page 36 of their document, you will see what constitutes a friendly amendment. I believe this was not done correctly, and it really gives the appearance that the board it can give an appearance that the board is operating behind scenes and not sharing information with the public. I also transitioned to, I really hope somebody can explain this to us as the public. We were told that we had, 6 or 7 months ago, we were all told we're financially healthy in this district. And then we're told that we enter into this school year with a $7.2 million shortfall. And recently there was an email that went out saying in the 2024-2025 school year, we will have a $9 million shortfall. So I'm confused. I hope the members of the school board understand. Does this mean we have over a $16 million deficit for this year and next year? Or did we go in the last couple weeks from 7.2 to 9 million? So I think we need some clarification on this. And lastly, I did provide public comment at the policy meeting about the ADA notice, the proposed changes. I'm really hoping those were noted and taken down because there are omissions, there's errors in that, and there's many things that need to be looked at differently. So those are my comments, and I'm just encouraging you to hopefully provide yourself with some education on what friendly amendments are, when they can be done. It was done as an email just to the board to change policy. And then you can see from the board recording from October 9th that none of this was shown to the public. It was all done, just amongst you. And we had community members that asked about this. So I encourage you to educate yourselves on friendly amendments and do it properly so that there is trust, there is transparency. Amendments should be happening, I believe, in the eye of the public and not behind scenes with just board members.
Hello, my name is Lucia Bravo Beckmeyer, and I'm here. I stand here regarding the email that was received at Jefferson School regarding the possible closure of Jefferson and the ending of open enrollment. I'm here as a Tulsa resident for over 20 years, a retired teacher and educator for over 30 years, and as a grandmother of a student who is presently at Jefferson under open enrollment is K4 and is now in first grade. I'm also the proud parent and grandparent of Tulsa East alumni, both graduated with distinction and honors. I remember very well the year 1998 when Tulsa became part of the open enrollment program. I was living here at the time. My younger sister was a teacher at Longfellow and Tulsa West. Well, Tulsa Public Schools became the largest participating district in this program. Why? Because the public schools were in dire financial trouble and facing low enrollment. The great amounts of money these students brought with them saved the day and was very welcome and beneficial for the district, providing it with some financial stability. As a Hispanic woman, I was glad when my granddaughter was accepted at Jefferson, as it embraces your mission of inclusivity, has outstanding teachers, and had a diverse student body. It has been implied that this population is dragging scores down, is disruptive, and I am hurt by these old tropes being used against these children. And also, I'm afraid that it seems that behind the scenes, decisions have been made already regarding open enrollment. I would like to point out that in these considerations of lower scores, the COVID pandemic has apparently played no effect, when in fact it has. It has played a strong effect in lowering scores across the board, not only here in Wisconsin, but across the United States. So I'm not sure if the 2 years of pandemic and remote learning was considered as part of the lowering of these scores. I'm sure Dr. Means and myself were able to obtain our higher education degrees. In my
30
case, a
seconds.
master's degree at UW, not only because of our own talents, but thanks to affirmative action. By reducing or eliminating open enrollment, you're denying these students the same opportunities Dr. Means and I enjoy. It also goes against the TOSA school's mission of inclusivity. It is denying the schools of the financial benefits these students bring, but more importantly, the cultural enrichment and diversity that is so important to embrace in these divisive and tense times.
You were in time.
Open enrollment is not an issue, but being used as a diversion for more serious problems. Thank you very much for your attention.
I want to pause a moment. For a point of information, the school board is not considering, certainly at this time, has not discussed, it is not involved in the work of the 2075 task force that asked for some, or taking a look at a variety of different options around how do we make sure that we're financially healthy well into the future. So folks are certainly welcome to comment tonight on the information that they have. The board is not taking up that information. We will have a feedback opportunity kind of for us to get an update on the work of the 2075 task force. And what I would say is that they are looking at many options. I applaud the community. I love that you all love your schools. Certainly I love the schools that my kids have been to, and a lot of them have been at their close friends have been at Jefferson and Washington. So the board is not at this time considering taking up anything. In May, we will get a report from the task force who is looking at lots and lots of things, and considering lots of options to make sure that our schools are as exceptional for kids, every single kid, across the greater Wauwatosa area. So this is not something right now that the board is engaged with. Again, you're welcome to comment, you're welcome to email the board. At some point in May, we will get a report with a variety of recommendations from the task force. At that point, we will consider them, and before any decisions are made, we will have wide-ranging conversations with folks from across the community.
My name is Emily Bilad, and I am the PTA president at Jefferson Elementary. I'm speaking today in regards to the task force options that were introduced to the general public in an email, a district sent email this week. I speak today as a Jefferson parent and volunteer PTA president, but primarily as an advocate for all Wauwatosa schools and students. I'm not naive to the financial predicament the district is in or why we are in it. I recognize the hurdle of facing what feels like an impossible decision. But the task force proposals, as stated, are fiscally unsound and devoid of evidence-based best practices. They're ignorant to what is best for the academic and mental well-being of our community's youngest and most vulnerable students. But worse than all else, they've been presented in a manner that has intentionally sown discord and generated uneasiness. They've been designed to pit neighbor against neighbor and highlighted the existing inequities among schools. The last few days have generated serious concerns for me about the district's view of the responsibilities of individual task force members. I do not want to encourage or allow the hard work of these volunteers to be used as a shield for the tough questions that should be answered by district administration. I'm committed to moving forward with a spirit of curiosity and always an assumption of positive intent. But I'm absolutely unwilling to let my students, my school staff, and my school community be used as a district pawn meant to raise tempers and get people engaged. I will continue to speak out, and I will work tirelessly so that the students at Jefferson, Washington, and all across the district get the fair, quality public education that they deserve. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Hi, my name is Catherine Hudson. I am the PTA co-president at Washington, and I have 3 boys enrolled at the school. I am here tonight to encourage action on the part of Dr. Means, the TOSA 2075 Task Force, and the board to keep our neighborhood schools open. Dr. Means, in a meeting with us, stated that he is not in favor of closing schools, which I appreciate. Yet 3 out of the 5 of the options that we've seen, I know you said there's several options, we've seen 5. 3 out of 5 of those involve closing schools. I encourage you to act in a way that matches your words, Dr. Means. Go back and determine more creative solutions that do not involve school closures. The analysis you have presented for each of these options is, in my mind, incomplete, which leads me to my next group, which is the TOSA Task Force. I urge you to be more critical of these proposals and to ask hard questions. What other alternatives are being considered and researched? Has an environmental impact study been done to assess the impact of traffic patterns? What is the research behind social emotional impacts of school closures on our students? What does research say about how school closures impact property values and crime rates? Have you considered the research around distance from school and attendance rates? I don't know if anyone here has ever walked from 60th and North Avenue to Lincoln in the middle of January, but that is what will be asked of our students. These are just some of the hard questions that I hope the task force is asking. And school board members, I urge you to put pressure on our district leadership. How did we get here? I know that state funding is a huge issue. How is the district looking to cut costs in ways that do not directly impact our students? And we should be pushing our district to explore alternatives and to paint a complete picture of what school closures will do to our community. People move to TOSA for neighborhood schools. They are the heartbeat of our community. The financial and communal health of our neighborhoods is directly connected to these institutions, and we all need to stand up and fight for them.
Hi, good evening. Similar thread, and appreciate the board and everyone's time this evening. Obviously, another concerned parent. My name is Derek Stripmatter. My wife, Michaela, and I are residents of Wauwatosa. We've lived here nearly 8 years. We have 3 children. 2 are enrolled at Washington, and hopefully 1 will be in the near future. Really here tonight just to talk about the same concerns everyone has of the potential closings of Washington and Jefferson Elementaries, some of the highest percent of resident schools in the district. We appreciate Dr. Means bringing this to our attention, the community attention, and we can discuss on the manner it was brought to our attention, but we live in Wauwatosa and we have a feeling that there's kind of numerous questions amongst us all, so we're just trying to bring a few here tonight. First and foremost, we ask that the team eliminate school closure as a viable option and push for solutions with the backing of a strong community. There are numerous goals, KPIs, mentioned from the task force and other stakeholders that we should measure. I think the highest thing we can measure is that closing any of our schools is a failure. Please don't let our generation's failure impact future generations. We supported the referendum in 2018 because we believed in this community and our public schools. To consider closure so shortly after a referendum, which stated no schools will be closed, would be a great disappointment to the community and a violation of trust. The community will want to know what could have been done differently to avoid this situation and how those funds were appropriated. The consultant advised boundary adjustments to handle anticipated growth. Washington is one of the schools expected to maintain or grow residents based on the data provided, and has a high percentage of schools it stands today. And I would add that I can see this when I walk the neighborhood and see several young families with little children, expecting mothers, and future TOSA Washington students. I ask that all involved ask a few questions as they proceed. How will closure impact our community? How many residents will leave? How will future residents be attracted to a neighborhood that no longer has walkable schools? How much will this impact the homes in the area? How much will this impact taxes that the Wauwatosa School District can collect to build on the district? What is the cost of annual maintenance and repair for Washington and Jefferson versus a school that is not planning on being cut?
You have about 20 seconds.
What are the main areas of concern? How would this closure affect operationally what we're doing at the other schools as well? I'll just end with are there options to do endowment funds to keep our elementaries open and maintenance? Appreciate everyone's time and thank you for hearing my comments and questions tonight.
I just want to make a quick comment. I really appreciate so many people being here today, and I absolutely understand the concern from the community. I guess what I'm wondering is how do we work together collaboratively? Because I think we all are here for the same goal. We all love our schools. We all love this district. We want it to be successful. We're also facing some really challenging financial situations. And we've asked the task force sort of to leave no stone unturned. And so they're going to go through multiple scenarios, including the ones that have been presented, but others that are going to come forward as well. So I know this won't be the only group that comes in front of the board and says, I'm scared, I don't want my school to close, or I don't want this proposal to affect my student, which I absolutely agree with. And so what I guess I'm going to look to you, Dr. Means, to maybe give some guidance to the parents here tonight, the community members here tonight, about how we can work together collaboratively over the next 10 months as the task force continues to consider options.
Thank you for that opportunity, Dr. Hoy. What I would share is that when we sent out the invitation to community members to even register to become part of the task force, I remember some of the board members said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And that question was posed to me because this is not a district-driven process, in that the decision, or I should say, the ideas that are emerging from the task force come from the task force. So I think there's this perception that the district is steering things. That's not true. There are over 60 task force members who have been encouraged to come up with their own ideas. We asked them to look at three different, and I'm going to talk about this a little later this evening, but we asked them to look at three very specific issues. One is our enrollment strategy. Do we want to continue to be the largest participant in the open enrollment program in the state of Wisconsin? The second is our long-range facilities plan, because candidly, if you go back and look at the facility advisory committee work from 2017 to 2018, it was identified clearly that there was a need for $350,000 of a referendum. And 7 schools were slated to be built, but the community tolerance was more around $125 million and for the building of 4 schools. Those 3 other schools that were slated to be built, their needs have not gone away. And we haven't even tapped into the other elementary schools that still have deferred maintenance issues, and we haven't talked about our secondary schools yet. So that's the second item. The third is, and I think it was referenced earlier, we have not received the amount of money we need to receive to properly educate children from the state of Wisconsin. That's just a reality. And we have been pulling things together. Mr. Brightman's done an outstanding job with his team to figure out what we need to do. But we've clearly told the community that we have enough reserves for 2 years to get through this process. But the development of the 2025, 2027 state budget will require the same energy that's in this room tonight to go to Madison. Because the reality of it is there's a state legislator in Rhinelander that has more control over what happens with the revenue that's available for education in Wauwatosa than this Board of Education has or our state legislators have. So we invited our task force to come together to create ideas and to be organic and to be creative. And their first take on these items did ask us to look at a 1 school closure or 2 school closure. We used the criteria of which of our 3 elementary schools that were not built in 2018, which of them are in the most dire need of capital improvements. And then we also looked at the other criteria of which of our elementary schools will have the minimal impact on movement on students. And that's why these 2 schools were identified this evening. But I think Dr. Jessup Anger referenced it. The task force, since their October 24th meeting, have come up with they've come up with more ideas. And it's going to involve more schools in our school community. And so what I would say is there is no proposal to close any school. They are scenarios that the task force is looking at. They're going to look at other scenarios, I would assume. The one idea that has been talked about at the task force level that Mr. Brightman and I continue to talk about And candidly, they are scenarios A and B. You can keep all 9 schools open, all elementary schools open. It may require, and you can keep all 9 schools open and reduce open enrollment. It just may mean that we will need support from the community through an operating referendum. I want to say that one more time. There is nothing off the table. In fact, it is a scenario that was reviewed by the task force where all schools can remain open. But it may mean that the same energy that's in this room this evening, we hope, can collaborate together for an operating referendum. That can happen. So I don't know where the task force is going to land. I think the process that we've identified is strong. And it's strong because we're not just relying on the task force. There will be an opportunity for the entire community to weigh in on a survey, to give input on this process, and there will also be town hall meetings before the board makes a final decision. Any decision that is made is ultimately a decision made by the 7 elected members of the school board. I think there's been a misinformation in regards to a date that I believe is important. So let me state the accurate date. From a legislative and legal perspective, by August 27th, 2024, this Board of Education must pass in the affirmative a resolution on if you want to go to referendum and place referendum questions on the November 2024 ballot. You have until August 27th. Now, the last board meeting in August is August 26th. So the entire process has been developed where the task force, the community had ample time to give the Board of Education counsel on how you want to proceed. Do you want to keep all schools open? I hope so. But that means we may need to look at some other means of generating revenue. There are varying opinions, and what I've learned about Wauwatosa is that there's no shortage of opinions, and people have perspectives. And for every individual who says, keep our schools open, I do receive the emails, I do receive the calls that will say, we need to reduce our footprint. And so our entire goal was to put all those people in the same room and to have really difficult conversations. Conversations that sometimes communities avoid. Sometimes the conversations that we just don't dive into. We talked about at one of our task force meetings that the 2018 referendum had 2 parameters on it. And the 2 parameters were, we were not changing boundary lines and we're not closing schools. But what that did is that moved the fiduciary responsibility of having conversations about the long-range facility plan of this district and the long-range financial plan of this district. It just moved that conversation 5-6 years down the road. We can't continue to ignore these conversations. These are discussions that are happening in every school district in Wisconsin. I believe that this community can rally together. I believe that overall this community does believe in keeping all of its schools open, but ultimately we're going to have to make a decision on what level of revenue is going to be generated. Is it going to come from the community? Do you want us to reduce costs? Do you want us to do a little bit of both? But we have clearly been told by the legislature in Madison that they're not going to give us more money. They clearly made that known. So now this becomes a local decision. And so what does the community want to do? You want to keep your schools open? I want to see that happen, but it's going to require us to do some really difficult things in the next few months.
I'm gonna take the 2 people at the microphone, 2 people online, for that Mr. Meyer, and then I think we're.
This young lady is waiting and she is with the walker, so that would be nice if she could be heard.
We can move the microphone to her. So you can just give her the microphone.
So we'll
Give us a minute.
and then I'm gonna recognize Mr. Meyer before we.
Tim, if you can help them out, that would be
Yeah,
great.
I don't, okay.
And everyone, I'm gonna recognize Mr. Meyer first.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you for recognizing me. I've been around here a while. Of course, I would like to speak to Dr. Hoy's call for collaboration. And some history maybe shows how we need that collaboration. As early as 1996 and 1997, there was talk in the school district about closing Wilson School. I was elected to the board for the first time in April of 2004. In January of 2005, the board voted 4-3 to close Wilson School. In that meeting, there was one board member who was on the fence, and it certainly appeared that the board member made the decision during the meeting. There was an election that April of 2005. New board members were elected, and the board promptly voted to keep Wilson School open. I was in the losing side 4-3 in January of 2005. On the winning side 5-2 in April of 2005. And Wilson stayed open. There was a struggle over the years about how to get students into school. We have a charter, and now we have the very successful STEM school. And lo and behold, finally, with the capital referendum, we built a new Wilson School. So that history shows you it can go either way. It depends upon community involvement and community engagement to inform the school board about what the community wants. And what Dr. Means has done for you is given you very ample notice that these conversations are going on. And my example from the past shows that it's not necessarily going to go one way or the other. It will depend on what the community wants. So the board desperately needs an active and engaged community for the next, at least the next few months. That it's not a time anymore where you can say, well, we elected the school board and they're going to figure it out. Well, we need your help. We need your collaboration to try to figure it out, because we are at a crossroads, as we were in 2005 and as we were with the referendum. So it can go either way, and it will go whatever way the community wants it to go. So I hope that helps. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Julie. I just want to make one comment here in relation to the affirmative action policy, or the action policy that is on the docket at the end of the meeting tonight. I applaud that there's been an attempt to make this all happen here. I'm also wondering if there might be some additional education, because it looks like the diversity inclusion, Ms. Holland's in charge of all accommodations, and I mean, there's a lot of disability accommodations, so I'm wondering if there'd be a way of giving her more training so that she can understand some of these other accommodations. Because it looks like she's gonna be the person that everybody's gonna have to go to if they need some type of accommodation here. Because there's a lot of accommodations for people with disabilities that are out there. And there's a lot of, and just to let you know, there's a lot of people who are minorities who have disabilities as well. And I know that that's another question, another comment I just want to make as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Nicole Etter, and I'm a Wauwatosa spouse of a TOSA teacher, and also a member of Supporter Schools Wauwatosa. And I just want to share an excerpt that SOS posted on social media in recent days. We know that many in our community are reeling after hearing the news of possible school closures. It's also important to remember that our state is currently sitting on a massive budget surplus of more than $7 billion. It's important for the community to remember that these decisions are being forced upon TOSA because of a state budget that has chronically underfunded our public schools. Since the early 2000s, state funding has not kept pace with inflation. As we reported earlier this year, our public schools got yet another raw state budget deal. The meager special education reimbursement rate, just 33.5% compared to the need of 60% or more, is morally reprehensible. We needed an increase of per pupil spending of over $1,000 and got just $325. Public school dollars are being increasingly siphoned off for unaccountable private voucher schools at unprecedented levels. The state is not upholding its constitutional duty to adequately fund our public schools, forcing districts statewide to debate how to stretch and divide the scraps. We're grateful to the community members who are giving their time and energy to the district's 2075 task force. They are wrestling with some truly heartbreaking, impossible issues. Once they make their recommendations, I know that those hard decisions are going to fall to the folks sitting in front of me right now. This is obviously a constantly evolving situation, and I just want to urge the community to stay involved and to let's work together to find the best possible solution for our students, staff, and community.
Hello, my name is Mike Holden, Wauwatosa parent. I won't belabor the topic too much longer because the statements before me are better prepared than mine. But to the same point, and I appreciate the comments from Michael and also Jenny, that we do need to work together because we feel like that task force does not represent us as a community very well, and that we can collaborate well together. And the way that was rolled out was done in very low emotional intelligence state because it was done on the eve of our children's parent-teacher conferences, to the point of they had to tell us, we can't talk about it there, so we can focus on the children. So doing it there, it erodes trust in you guys, erodes in trust that you are actually going to collaborate with us. So if there's a way that we can work on that and smooth that out, that would be ideal. So moving forward, we'd like to do this, we want to, and we are, as a community, going to rally around this to try to fix the situation, but we need you guys to help us out as well. Thank you.
I want to make a quick comment about the 2075 task force. This is a collection of individuals who've raised their hand from the community, many like parents, just like each of you in the audience. They are in the very beginning stages of the really process of pulling apart some complex things, really rolling up their sleeves, and they're really trying to explore and understand how do we make the schools as strong as possible going forward. And so I just as I hope the board is always going to be working with the community, and I echo Mr. Meyer and Dr. Boyd's comments, the 2075 group is us. They are our tool and they are our resource, and they are folks who are thoughtful and examining things in every possible angle. It's imperative that they do that. They need to find creative solutions to really hard, complex problems. There's folks who are talking online about, we'll just do this and do that. This is a lot. There's no simple silver bullet here. So coming together and figuring this out as a community, I would say if you've got thoughts, if you've got suggestions, please make sure that you're sharing those with the 2075 task force. You're also welcome to email the board, Dr. Means. And so we really, Mr. Meyer's perfectly right. If we're going to figure this out, we need a lot of people who really care, who are advocating, who are thinking of creative solutions, and looking for ways to figure out how we can navigate through this together as a community. We've got one last individual I'm going to call upon, Emily Anker. Jamie, if you can open up her line.
Sure. Emily, you have the microphone.
Thanks, everyone. Emily Achor. I have two daughters at Eisenhower in JK in first grade. I'm also a member of the Eisenhower PTA. Also wanted to comment on the task force recommendation item. I do appreciate all of the volunteer efforts that have gone into this work. As a parent volunteer myself, I know that it can be difficult to come up with activities and ideas that are pleasing to everyone. I do have to agree with some of the comments made about the rigor around some of the items presented. It's lacking some citations that I would like to see regarding like comments for moving a small amount of students has a negative impact as well. I feel like there should be a citation there. Some of the other comments that folks made about EAPs, special ed, I think that those should be front and center. I think if anything, what we learned this year at Eisenhower is that Those are important factors to teacher satisfaction, retention, class functioning. So seeing that incorporated would be great. And then across all 5 scenarios, it's pretty hard to pick out exactly the cost savings without flipping back and forth and doing the math. So if I could also just make the suggestion that that's laid out, exactly how much cost savings each scenario would do by comparison, because it's really not clear to me that some of them would be advantageous at all. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'm gonna close public comment for this evening. Any board members, any final reflections or? Thank you all. We are next going to move into our oath of office for our student representatives. School Board Clerk Dr. Lynn Worley will administer the oath of office to student representatives newly selected for the Wauwatosa School.
Okay, so I'm gonna move up front, and when I call your name, if you could go to the microphone that's just being used.
If the news can make sure you also have covered this, the parents.
I, Megan Katie. Having been appointed to the office of student representative.
Having been appointed to the office of student representative
On the Wauwatosa School Board.
On the Wauwatosa School Board.
For the 2023-24 school year.
For the 2023-24 school year.
But have not yet entered upon the duties thereof.
But have not entered upon the duties thereof.
Swear or affirm.
Swear or affirm.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
And will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
And will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. While we're going through the physical understanding, I just want to note that this was shared last time, processed a lot of applicants. So we're seeing before that was. I, Max Ramp.
I, Max Rand,
Having been appointed to the office of student representative.
have been appointed to the office of student representative
On the Wauwatosa School Board for the 2023-24 school year.
on the Wauwatosa School Board for the 2023-24 school year,
But have not yet entered upon the duties thereof.
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof.
Swear or affirm.
Swear or affirm
That I will support the Constitution of the United States.
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
And the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin.
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
And will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Good afternoon. I, Journey Love Taylor.
I, Journey Love Taylor.
Having been appointed to the office of student representative.
Having been appointed to the office of student representative.
On the Wauwatosa School Board.
On the Wauwatosa School Board.
For the 2023-24 school year.
For the 2023-2024 school year.
But have not yet entered upon the duties thereof.
But have not yet entered the duties thereof.
swear or affirm
swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Congratulations. I, Alexandra Ali Craddock-Hill,
Alexandra Ali Craddock-Hill,
having been appointed to the office of student representative
having been appointed to the office of representative
on the Wauwatosa School Board
on the Wauwatosa School Board
for the 2023-24 school year,
for the 2023-24 school year,
but have not yet entered upon the duties thereof,
but have not entered upon the duties therefore of,
swear or affirm
swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Congratulations to all four of you, and thank you very much for your service. We are next going to move on to our consent agenda item. Are there any items on the consent agenda which board members would like to remove for separate discussion? Dr. Williams? Are you with the consent agenda?
I'm good.
I was just, I wanted to see.
Oh, yes, I'm fine.
Any board discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, please call
May I have a motion?
Should I make a motion? It is recommended that the school board approve the consent agenda as presented, and I so move.
the roll. And a second,
Second.
now any board discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Boyd?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Worthing?
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Anger?
Yes, and the consent agenda passes. Next up is strategic goal 1, academic performance, 2023 summer school report to the school. For members of the community and a reminder for the board, this is a flipped presentation, so we had a short video from Mr. Oliver, who's our summer school principal, who provided the overview. There was an executive report, and so hopefully everyone got a chance to review all that. It's available both for the community as well as the board on board docs. And now we're here for a pretty quick summary, and any comments and then any questions.
Thank you for the introduction, Dr. Joseph Anger. My name is Nicole Marble. I'm the Chief Academic Officer here in the Wauwatosa School District, and I'm seated next to our summer school coordinator, Mr. Stephen Oliver. As indicated, we did have a flip presentation, and one of the items that did not make it into the flip presentation or the executive summary that we would like to report out at this juncture is that the summer school came out with a surplus of $128,000. In previous years, we had noted that we were under and we're not making any sort of financial gains by having summer school. So we did make, had a very intentional approach at what the courses that we were running, that we had enough students that it made it financially appropriate to run the courses. In the past, we were running courses with very few students, and that left us with a deficit at the end of summer school. So we right-sized that, and we were able to come forward above water with summer school. So just wanted to add that additional note that was not in the original presentation or executive summary. And with that, any questions that you might have for us?
One quick question, maybe for Mr. Brightman. Does summer school enrollment provide us with additional tax relief as it has in the past, with how the students are counted. That maybe works into the calculus of profit loss and such.
Yeah, as we analyze the program to see, does it break even, does it make a little bit of money for the district, does it lose money? A year ago, it lost $64,760. We netted everything together. This year, it was to the positive by $63,000. So I think our right sizing, like you said, with the staffing and section sizes made sense, and it worked the way we thought it would. We look at expenditures, as you would think we would. There are operating costs, things like custodial services, utilities, that kind of thing to factor in. There are supplies and materials, about $10,000, and then wages and benefits, about $750,000 for the program. The revenue side is where it gets a little tricky, and we'll lead to that, where there's a net full-time equivalency for the summer school attendance. And this year, it netted out to a full-time year equivalent of 79 students. And so we get to take that 79 students times our revenue amount of $11,019 to give us $870,000 in revenue from that program to offset those expenditures.
So what that means, those same 79 are fully counted during the regular school year. And then when those same people attend summer school, it gives us extra in the count in some fashion. It's very complex, and that's what we're saying. Just so that general theme is understood. A student who attends our fall and spring, regular school year, when they attend the summer school, that student becomes more than a 1.0 student. There becomes something more than that in the state aid program.
Yeah, summer schools operated like a separate school year, essentially, in the summertime. So. Other questions or comments from the board?
Does your, are you in charge of the extended year program that takes place in summer school? Is that something that falls under Mr. Pinion?
That would fall under Mr. Pinion's purview or the, Ms. Holan.
I'll reach out to somebody then. So as we're focusing on academic achievement in our district, I hope that when you're looking at the curriculum for next year, I know you're going to send out a lot of surveys and ask staff and parents, but I hope that we can focus on making some of our course offerings for the K-8 students more rigorous, so that we maybe have less learning loss through the summer, since we have so many students in our district who attend summer school. That just seems like a great opportunity, so we can start really strong in the fall of the year. And thank you for your work. My kids actually really like going to summer school, so thank you for all of your work you do.
You're welcome.
I just had a question about kind of off what Liz said. Can you tell me a little bit about the K-8 programming that's offered for our students?
Well, the K-8 program is enrichment, and I take it from that perspective of, taking a break from school, what kids are going to be interested in, as well as having that opportunity. So in respect to some of the classes, math support or reading, ELA, I think getting kids invested in those programs during the summertime also has to be fun. It has to reach them in ways that maybe aren't unique or a little bit different from the ways that we do during the regular school year. Aside from that, this year we added 3 programs in the K-8 area in respect to math, one being Minecraft, and it was a hit, connecting kids with Minecraft. And it was amazing actually seeing how the teacher, Wauwatosa teacher, Brian Condon, did an amazing job connecting with the kids in respect to that type of medium, and also getting them to think about math in a unique way. We had another class that we added called Puzzle Me that got them really thinking about critical thinking and how it can apply to playing board games, and then also, kind of getting them to reflect on their learning in that process. And then the last one was a tech class, 3D design, where they actually got to create some things with the 3D press, and that was also really interesting. So trying to think kind of outside the box in respect to the classes, so kids can have engagement. I think in the area of language, it's a great opportunity for our students to, in areas so we have Spanish, right? But we don't have German or French until we get to the middle school. So great opportunity for kids to have that first chance. In the past, we've had sign language. We don't have that right now. I've also been interested looking at possibly Japanese or Mandarin as a possibility of an enrichment course that kids would be interested in. And there are vast array of languages that would be interesting for kids to take. Our classes are always very, and we do have an assortment. I sometimes bring them over here after summer school of ceramics that students do. And so that's another opportunity for kids to, have that opportunity. So that kind of is the gist of it. Take in mind that this is 1 week out of school and the kids have that opportunity. We're going to be looking at some data about that summer, that loss, that gap, and see just exactly what classes. I have an opportunity with Dr. Marble, and we're going to be, sending out some surveys and saying, okay, what is it that we can do and what is connecting with kids that is helping them in respect to maintaining that. And there might be programs that we're looking at that just aren't working. And that we should be adding some different, possibilities to cover that gap. So.
And just to clarify, these summer school opportunities are available to all of our Wauwatosa students at no cost, correct?
That's correct.
That's correct.
And I just wondered if we can take maybe a more like targeted and intentional approach to get this information to some families for students, especially in K-8, who might struggle in a certain academic area where this might really enhance their learning environment and get them prepared for the next school year, similar to what Liz. Great. Yes, thank you for the work and the presentation.
Dr. Worley?
Yes, also thank you for making summer school possible and for looking at this and reviewing it. I just want to encourage you, maybe this is already planned, to include some very specific survey questions around families whose children have supports or disabilities that may make it mean that they need additional support during the summer. It hasn't always been the case in our district. Sometimes we have good support structures, sometimes we don't. I know they cost money, but I want to get I'd love to have you get some feedback on how that has gone and what's really needed, and then maybe they'll make some decisions about what to include and what not to include.
Just a little input on that is that in respect to, as we've gone with some of our summer school classes in respect to the credit ones, the hybrid model, which sometimes is 2 days on or sometimes 1 day on, then creates this responsibility that falls upon the student. So where there's some flexibility in respect to the class and the expectations to the student to be there, it also creates some gaps. And how do we continue that support outside in respect to that hybrid model? And so that is something, so with the opportunity to give kids that flexibility and for families also to have that flexibility with summer school, there's also then the gaps that we're putting, requiring the learner to, basically be responsible for that. But yet there is support on, at both of our facilities in respect to that. But yeah, it is a good point.
If I could just follow up, for example, I think maybe part of what we're asking is what, you could break that out for sure from what you're saying. I was also just even generally thinking about the atmosphere of support. So I've been told as a summer school parent that summer school wasn't necessarily a place for kids that needed a lot of support. So I just want to make sure that we're getting, as a board member now, that we're getting the resources that are needed, because we often talk about this as an opportunity for kids who are struggling on this or struggling on that. If we're really going to go into that, full force and feet first, I want to make sure that we're really looking at what those resources are so we don't have staff struggling. I appreciated the resource center this summer. It probably could be utilized even more than it was.
and that might be a communication piece. I think there's a good base there. I just want to make sure that we're asking where the gaps are, so we're hearing from the students who are experts, however, we're asking this to people who have the disabilities, and the family members that are supporting them. And then making sure that as a district, we're really accounting for that, so that your staff in the summer, who are very creative and wonderful about making it work, are actually having the resources they need.
Thank you so much for being here, for your commitment to the summer school program. I understand the first year you took it over, it was kind of mid-year, you had to jump in and you had a huge undertaking. So thank you so much for making sure that our students have access to summer school. This is, I think, a question maybe more for you, Dr. Marble. I'm thinking about our students that we're recognizing have more learning sort of ground to make up. So our lowest performing students, whether that's in the bottom 25th percentile, bottom 10th percentile, however we're defining it. How are we using summer school to sort of, with intentionality, to make sure that we're helping those students not just have kind of stop summer losses, but really gain ground during the summer so that they can start the next school year on better footing?
To be honest, we have not yet had the opportunity to explore how we can support that programming through summer school. Some of our individual schools have done some work at the local level to provide students with particular resources over the summer and having office hours and opportunities for students to come together as a school community over the summer. It is a gap that currently exists that we do want to do some additional work around. We just haven't had the time or capacity to do that at this juncture.
Do you anticipate we'll be able to talk about that for next summer?
I know that summer school has been something that has continued to emerge, and we want to give it the attention that it deserves. But right now, that would be at the expense of the other 180 some days that we are trying to also make sure that we have guaranteed and viable learning for our children during the regular school year. So yes, we are not losing sight of it. It's priorities and where we want to make sure that we are where all of our eggs are in what basket.
Yeah, I do understand that. If not this summer, the following summer.
It's on our radar. I don't want to make any promises that will come back and haunt me, but yes, we are not losing sight of it. The fact that I meet with Mr. Oliver on every other week and we're continuing to do that, and we're having more proactive conversations is our commitment that we are not we don't want summer school to be an afterthought.
So here's the theme. The theme is we've carved out a 0.4 FTE, where 40% of Mr. Oliver's allocation is dedicated to planning for summer school year round. So when the state of Wisconsin doesn't provide school districts with ample resources, we're taking that 0.4, that 40% somewhere else. So then annually, when we have to come and answer questions from the board on how more robust you want summer school to be, we're trying to dedicate as much attention to it as possible. But when we have task force members who've asked us to develop 7 new scenarios from their last meeting on October 24th, Dr. Marble's time is pulled away from the day-to-day work of leading the academic focus of the district. Mr. Brightman has been pulled away from focusing on the district. These are the priorities and challenges that are in front of us. Do we want to make our summer school robust and everything that you all asked us you want to see happen? Absolutely. And I think Mr. Meyer's question of, and I appreciate Mr. Brightman boiling it down to the fact that we can count 79 more students in our revenue limit, which garners us more revenue authority. That's important. We want to make it more appealing so we can have that number get higher than 79. But we can only do that if we have the resources, and we're trying our best. We want to, there's an adage that I think Mr. Brightman's brought to us that I really like, that will also be another theme for tonight. We can do anything. We can't do everything. We can do anything that you want us to do, but we cannot do everything. So we're presenting a lot of options to not only the board, but the community, so we can be very strategic around what we want to become as a school system. Does that capture it, Dr. Marble?
Yes.
Thank you.
And just to add, 2 years ago, you made the point Dr. Means came to me and asked if I would take on this venture. And I think he said that he noticed one time when we did a walkthrough through his school, he's like, I think you have some ideas. I do. I have ideas for summer school. And every week when we meet, we talk. I have to understand, just how this works in the whole system. And yeah, I mean, I could go 100%, summer school and design systems and classes. I'd love to do that. The reality is right now is, the focus is here and I'm working behind the scenes, but I enjoy it. Thank you, Dr. Means, for giving me this opportunity. And, I've got some of my workers for summer school. That's, I look around here and, it's a great place. So we have a great summer school program and looking to grow it and make it better for everyone. So thanks for your support.
Couple comments. One, I love that this is a tradition on so many different schools for kids in elementary schools that provided this enrichment free to the community. Kids are being introduced to a variety of different topics. I had a kiddo that decided to take Spanish, French, maybe German, and possibly sign language all in the summer. It was a lot. Beginning plan band blast off, which a lot of parents have done and families have done as kids are entering into middle school to kickstart it. I really hope the community takes a look at these options. I know it's not a summer school component, but whatever we can do to make sure there's spaces in Summer Adventure Club, there's no more anxiety across TOSA than maybe some more. A lot of anxiety around TOSA, around that, is it the preferred, whatever the high interest sign up is that happens almost the exact same time when you have to drop your kids off at school. I think they moved it back. And so thank you for doing that. Two things I often think about is the challenge of getting instructors and teachers and challenge for that. So please continue to look forward. I know teachers have been so tired the last couple of years over summer, they have chosen not to teach. Maybe in pre-pandemic they were teaching more. But I know that a lot of teachers do some really great things. So thank you for all your work in gathering and garnering that. And then all the other opportunities, I think my colleagues have said a variety of things. I know that this isn't right now at the top of the list of all the many things that you're working on to drive both rigor, academic achievement, and student success. But I think it's definitely a tool. So I look forward whenever it is that you do come back to hearing those opportunities and look forward to your great work as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
I was a employee at summer school. I worked the K-5 through 5th grade ceramics class, and just to see the joy the kids had on their faces to make things out of clay and learn to do things that they typically didn't get to do in school was just a magical experience that I hope continues to happen. And I know as long as Mr. Oliver is the coordinator of summer school, it will continue. He's done great things. He helped me when I was in the summer school program, and to be employed as a summer school helper to see these kids just light up and show me all the things they've made during summer school. When we get back to Summer Adventure Club, it was just amazing. That's it.
Thank you, Allie.
We're staying in the strategic goal 1 academic performance. Several action items. The first is action to approve the recommended new course proposal, teacher education and pre-service course.
It is recommended that the school board approve the recommended new course proposal, teacher education pre-service course, and I so move.
May I have a second on the 7?
Second.
This is, we got the presentation, had an opportunity to ask questions. There was a period of 2-week window where the board could kind of reach out with additional questions. Any kind of additional comments or questions from staff within the district? Any sense on this?
No.
Any questions or comments from the board on this one? Please call the roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt? Yes. Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Rowley?
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Wellman?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jesse David?
Yes. And that item passes. One question I had, because I may have gotten this from my junior year in high school, will these courses be available already next year?
The reason why we use this timeline right now, so Dr. Marble and her team can change the course catalog for high school students so they can enroll for courses for the 24-25 school year.
Yes.
Or yes. Next up is action to approve the recommended 6 through 12 science curriculum adoption and new course proposal. Dr. Lloyd.
It is recommended that the school board approve the recommended 6 through 12 science curriculum adoption and new course proposal, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
All of it to Mr. Morris. Board discussion and comments on this item. Seeing Dr. Lloyd.
For the costs that are associated with this, are these one-time costs, or is this an annual cost? If it's one time, is there an annual cost that will go along with it?
Yeah, so what we put into the executive summary is the startup costs that you see. So that is just this kind of startup annual cost. Annual costs that could be associated with these programs might include some consumable costs. If there would be a need to bring anything forward to the board, that would come. We would bring that back, but right now this is the startup costs and consumable costs, and budgeting has been aligned to support that.
Dr. Marble, what's your overall budget for curricular adoption?
Overall budget for curricular adoptions? I would say that the overall budget for curriculum adoptions currently maybe about roughly like 300,000.
For how many students in the district?
Just about 7,000.
Is that an ample or appropriate budget?
No,
for
sir.
curriculum adoption for a district our size?
No, sir.
How long has that budget been that way? Not that this is a hearing that you have.
I am not sure. It's what I inherited.
So I would just ask the board to remember from the presentations from October 9th, we've referenced that some of these curricular items have not been reviewed, in some cases over 10 years. The curriculum has not been updated, and the reason why the curriculum hasn't been updated is because in some cases, we don't have the budget for it. There are individuals in the community who have stopped me, who have stopped Dr. Marble. They want to see greater academic achievement from our district. If you are asking this academic team to keep our curriculum updated with, let's just round it up to $400,000 for 7,000 students, that's not appropriate. It's not appropriate. This is one of the many things that we have discovered, and we shared this through our audits that we've done and we've discussed over time. These are the challenges that we find ourselves in from a budgetary standpoint. So I want to thank, again, you for answering my questions and for just illustrating the challenge that we had.
And I just want to elevate for the board and for the community that the curriculum proposals that are before you or that came before you earlier and that you're voting on this evening, we have set aside grant funds to be able to pay for this money or for the resources so that we do not have to dip into the Fund 10 that Dr. Means is referencing. And then in terms of professional learning, we've also looked to utilize title funds, so Title II and Title IV, to be able to offset the costs. We don't have to dip into to Fund 10 as well.
Then this curriculum, just one more question. Okay. And then this science curriculum is for all students in middle school, with the exception of STEM and Montessori, and then it's also for our high school students. So annually, how many students do you think would benefit from this new curriculum?
Adding it up.
1,500, about, yeah.
roughly, this is just quick math in our head, but maybe 1,500 students. Yeah.
Any other board comments or questions? Colleen?
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. White?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Welling?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Baker?
Yes, and that passes. Thank you for your incredible work. The audit that was delivered to us a long time ago. That's now all this work. Good creativity. Science. Thank you for all
I want to thank our curriculum coordinators who have led this process. I know there's been a lot of talk about the additional staff that have been located here at Fisher. If we didn't have curriculum coordinators, the development of new curriculum would not happen. So I just want to thank you for your fine work.
Thank you.
Yes. Next up is action to approve the recommended 6 through 12 technology education curriculum. Mr. Meyer.
It is recommended that the school board approve the recommended 6 to 12 technology education curriculum adoption and new course proposal, and I so move.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Willis. Any additional information to share? Any board comments or questions? Anything from the students?
I personally think all these new ideas coming in is great and will give students more opportunities to enjoy things, especially, I know this was with the previous section, but many students at West have always wanted to take AP Environmental Science, and now they'll have the opportunity to, so I think this is great.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. White?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Rowley?
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Welling?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Joseph Baker?
Yes. And that item passes. E, action to approve the recommended 9 through 12 English language arts curriculum.
It is recommended that the school board approve the recommended 9 through 12 English language arts curriculum adoption and new course proposal, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Anything on this item? And for the community who's here, who may not have been watching last week, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we had a substantial conversation presentation. So this has been kind of substantial information has been shared. There was an audit several months ago, review, conversation, additional information provided, back and forth between the board and the staff, questions answered. So we're kind of at the second reading of this. So if you're feeling like we're not talking much, a lot of that has happened. Of course, it's been laid over the last 7 months. Any more comments? Dr.
We had a really interesting email from a community member, and I wanted to just kind of pose the question to you. So this community member was commenting on this new curriculum and hoping that there will be core text that will be a little bit more forward-thinking, more inclusive, noticing that, you know, we want our students to go through ELA and really be excited about literature, and not walking away feeling like, oh, this is like so dry. Are there core texts that will be part of this new curriculum that you think are going to be new and exciting and engaging for students?
Absolutely. If you look at the Common Lit 360 resource, the first glance, you're looking at the short reads that are offered there to do the, intentional reading comprehension skills monitoring, like monitoring your comprehension and close reading, and then paired with each unit tied to the essential question are additional long reads, and then supportive materials for teachers to foster literature circles with the essential question in mind while doing those close readings. And then there's also supplemental texts that are used as well. So it's all within that package if you dig into that. And those are the things that we'll be talking about during implementation, how to use those strategically.
So this, just to clarify, this is currently being piloted in 6th grade, right?
It was piloted in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But we're approving it just through 9 through 12.
Correct.
So it's, I've had parent-teacher conferences since that time and kind of really dug in with the English teacher on his thoughts. what kind of autonomy, it kind of goes to the question that Jenny asked, what teachers have in like using resources? And I can also speak for my own kiddo who does not love it, because most things are on the computer, right? So is there an opportunity to have like text in their hands? Because I think it's a different style of learning, and I understand we're moving towards, a digital platform, but being someone who like needs something in my hand, I just wonder what kind of flexibility there was for just diverse learners.
Absolutely. So the resource does honor the science of teaching, right? Having that strong standards alignment, and then, already having reflective conversation with the teachers that are piloting the curriculum as to where their art can start to play in, and having those conversations. But during year one, we want to implement the resource with fidelity. But then I think with this pilot program that we just did, we have opened the door to say, okay, where can we start bringing in some art by still honoring the integrity of the program. We didn't get a chance to do the long reads that I just talked about or the supplemental text yet. We wanted them to get the feel of the program, and then, to be able to walk away with, is this the resource that we want to use at the middle school? Because the next unit, they'll be piloting a different resource. So that's our goal right now.
Yeah. So yeah, just making sure too, like even as we, potentially approve this, just that we're giving teachers that autonomy. I mean, ELA can be such a magical place where kids just discover so much, right? But I think it's one of those subjects that the teacher really can impact that learning experience with bringing in their, different perspectives and different types of literature. So I just don't want to be like confined to this new platform.
Definitely.
I was also at conferences last week, and I asked the ELA teacher how it was going, and she gave me some of the curriculum materials to look at. And she said this was the most fun she's had teaching a curriculum, and that the students were much more engaged this year as she's been piloting it. So I think bigger picture, when we talk about staff retention and staff satisfaction, giving them tools that make them excited to teach is just another way to encourage them to work and stay in our district. So thank you for all of your work on finding these curriculums.
I would be remiss if I just kind of stamped what you said just now. The work that went into all of this, and I know that, and this goes with all of the curriculum adoptions, is all of our curriculum coordinators and our director of curriculum, Ms. Ebert, have been working in tandem and in lockstep with our teachers. So we have had teacher perspective throughout the entire journey. So I just want to make sure that that's understood by our community and by our school board as well.
In addition to the teacher and the educator perspective, outside of the pilot, did we have any other student perspective or students from the early stages that we're talking about for ninth grade beyond the 6th, 7th, and 8th on the impact of this going to this, we call this the Common Lit 360?
During the high school, sorry. Thank you. During the high school review, we did not pilot at the high school level, but we did take time to do Q&A sessions with other high schools and study what was the impact that this resource was being used at those different high schools. And that was the resources and the data that we used to make a decision going forward. Through the whole review process, thinking about a resource to adopt, it's a huge decision, and it's thinking about what can be something that's going to benefit our students, but then be user-friendly for our teachers as well. So a lot of careful consideration and conversations were had with other schools, and looking at different platforms as to, the research that's out there and how kids are performing. That kind of data is what we use for the high school. And now that we're piloting at the middle school, we're able to bring in student surveying and feedback as well, along with our teachers too.
And kind of second part to that is, in those other schools that you're kind of had in that analysis of, were you finding any correlations there of achievement accelerations with this program versus other schools that, I don't say the old-fashioned way, but what would be the tried and true way before? If we're seeing those things, we're going to be able to close gaps and not create, from my perspective, I've been hearing from other parents and people in the community of making sure we are not inadvertently creating some micro gaps in between, A level, B level, C level students. That's not the term that's related to the best, but make sure that in this pace for going to something that's seems to be very progressive like this, that we're not going to be using the teachers and that autonomy that Jessica was talking about there, where it's the students are at their own behest to teach themselves, because there's that digital nature, that there's not time being taken away, going to other students that aren't being pushed hard enough, or ones that need more encouragement because of the curriculum in its form.
There is strong research backing for COMLET 360 program as far as student achievement is concerned. And then also like thinking about strategically in our first year of implementation, thinking about our universal instruction to meet the needs of all students, and then thinking about the other things that are in place within COMLET 360 where we can start to target, the different ends of spectrum of needs that we have. Those resources are available too as well.
I can add on to that. I think that was a critical component as we were evaluating curricular resources is how are those tools, again, it's a resource. The teacher in front of our students is the most important person and how they have access to tools is really critical. But looking at exactly how do those resources allow for teachers to help to meet the variance of learners before them, that was probably one of the most important elements of evaluation with our curricular review.
Any additional questions or comments? Please call roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoy?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Rowley?
Yes.
Ms. Hammer Wallen?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Baker?
Yes. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Next up is strategic goal 6, operations.
Happy to. It's a little warm, isn't it?
You don't want the finance guy sweating.
Yeah.
He's like,
Any updates for our new school committee room on the clear up? No? Next up is action to approve the 23-24 budget and certify the tax levy. Dr. Means and Mr. Brightman, can you start off by sharing with folks who are online and here tonight? How about I suspect the board has certainly gone through the calendar where we are, seems Mr. Brightman's already pulled it up, but we are at the very end of the budgeting process for this academic year. So it's kind of a weird time to approve the budget, and we did a preliminary approval, but that's not, before I joined the board, our process wouldn't have made any sense. But it doesn't.
yeah, and that is where I was going to start us off this evening. So we do have an annual budget calendar. It's hard to see on the screen. It is on board docs and you can see the text for it. But the main components, you'll see some shaded rows. The kind of pink shaded rows are where we're setting our projections and our best estimates. Where you see the yellow highlights, we're asking for board action throughout the process. So it started with board action back in January for open enrollment. We then went through some staffing plans, some staffing adoptions. We had board action on a preliminary budget back in June, you recall that. We then continue to update those
May I pause you
projections.
there?
Yeah, of course.
And we implemented a community engagement process that I don't believe happened in this district in the past, where there was a budget hearing and we held it, I believe, at Longfellow. And some board members were there. We haven't done that in the past, where we advertise to the community, we allow people to come in and ask questions as we were developing this preliminary budget. I just want to give kudos to Mr. Brightman and our team for taking those questions and making that process available.
Yeah, that was a great ad in our system. And so that was on May 31st. And we're legally required to have a budget hearing in October, but that's kind of late in the process, right? We're already a quarterly through our fiscal year. The board's already approved a preliminary budget, but that's the way the statutes require it. So we put in our own budget meeting, we call it, special meeting to discuss the budget. We had a good turnout, I thought, for doing it for the first time. Good discussions, good suggestions, good thoughts moving forward. And so that was a good ad for our purposes. September 15th, we started the school year. We do our first third Friday count. We went through that at a previous board meeting about those results. And we're continuing to see that slight increase to our resident enrollments. As we looked at October 15th, that's the big date every year where the state finalizes state allocations with some other main key components. And I'll go through what those key differences are between what we previously saw in the budget versus what happens on October 15th. Equalized property values get certified also as part of the mix. So that impacts the tax rate that I'll show you in a few minutes. And then tonight we're at October 30th. It is time to adopt the original budget and certify the tax levy. Interestingly enough, it's late October, when the board goes through this process, and by November 1st, the board must certify a tax levy to support the district operations. So we're a couple days away, so we have a little bit of wiggle room if needed. Hopefully we don't, but.
And with that, I'm actually going to turn to my colleague, Dr. Worley.
It is recommended that the school board approve the 2023-2024 budget, and I so move.
May I have a second? Back to you.
All right. So key updates since the last time we talked about the budget. As I mentioned, the DPI has given us our certified state aid, and it was certified at just under $15 million, $14.94 million. Kind of an interesting note for this year is when the state certified the aid, there was an added deduction for most districts and an inclusion for MPS of about $36 million in additional aid from an adjustment from last year. Our reduction was just under $1 million. So when you look at our levy increase for this year, $1 million of that is due to that one-time adjustment at the state level. Don't really know what that was from. We're guessing, my colleagues and I, that it's ESSER funded related when MPS and other larger districts settled their financials from this time last year to the spring when they certify final aid amounts. There was some kind of an adjustment done based on the shared costs and how that works within the formula with those federal ESSER aids. So that's likely the culprit of that, but that's just an important thing to note, and it's much more significant than typical. Typically, it's maybe a $50,000 adjustment because of all the different things that happen around the state. It's nothing we did here. It's just a statewide impact of how those shared costs get wrapped into the formula. The second piece is the private school voucher aid deduction. That increased from just over 1.1 million a year ago to just under $1.5 million this year. So that's a pretty large percentage increase. If you recall, even 5-6 years ago, that program was just beginning. So there was $0 in that program. So it's gotten some legs to it, and there was additional funding within this current state biennial budget for that program. That increase is added to our local tax levy for this year. So that's important to note too. It'll be captured somewhat in our aid reimbursements a year from now, but that increase is on our local levy for this year. The levy amount to support the voucher payments is equal to about 16 cents per thousand of equalized value, or that's about $57 on the average $350,000 house that we talked about in previous meetings. As I mentioned, it increased significantly over this last biennial budget, and it's done through a mix of state aid and revenue increases, tax levy increases to fund the program. One of our legislative requests, if you recall, was to have the state do a direct payment to voucher schools and get us out of that business of being in the mix of having levies and state aid impacts, and just do a direct payment to those, especially as the program continues to grow and will become more significant aspect of the state budget. Our total 23-24 tax levy net of everything above is $60,500,649. And you can see that on this first sheet. I know this is kind of a busy worksheet. This is how the state requires a board to adopt a budget in this format and to publish it and talk about it. That's why we provide the supplementary information that we've talked about at previous meetings in a much more, I think, friendly way to look at it. Before I get to that, I just want to mention another key significant item for this state's biennial budget. We haven't talked much about this here, but it's a significant part of funding schools in Wauwatosa and any property wealthy district across the state. And that's the school tax levy credits. Those were also increased substantially as part of this last state biennial budget. In fact, there was more money put into state tax levy credits than into the state aid formula itself. It was just under $500 million for state aid and $590 million for state tax levy credits. And this is another area that is commonly overlooked or misunderstood, and that's an intentional way that it's written in to kind of make it a little more difficult within school funding. It's a credit that's applied to individual property taxes, municipalities, and they're distributed across the tax base. But there's a direct offset to the levy that the board is approving tonight to what actually shows up on tax bills because of that school tax levy credit. So in some ways, we're much overstating the levy impact tonight of what has to be done, but we're legally required to report it in the way that we are and approving it in the way that we are tonight. But there's a substantial knockdown of that on individual property tax bills. So I did add a column or section into our tax levy analysis. So this is page 2 of the budget handout that's in board docs. And the top quarter of that page talks about the tax levy and its various components. And we've been through that before, so I won't go through that again. The center of the page where you look at equalized calculations and total tax base, That's where you see the tax rate impact going from 692 a year ago to 668. And that's a result of a very good increase, a 6.33% increase of overall property valuations in the district. So we've just surpassed that $9 billion with a B dollar valuation for the property values in the district. It's very likely that next year or the year after we'll go over that $10 billion mark, and that'll continue to escalate as property values continue to increase and developments happen. You're seeing it all over the city as we go, and those TID districts expire. All of those will compound on that valuation increase, which is a good thing. It shows a thriving, healthy community, and we prefer to be in that spot, obviously. So with that in the mix, the school taxes for this current levy, standing as it's shown here, would be $2,338 on that house. And that, again, that's just the school portion. There are other components that go on the tax bill, obviously. A couple of charts to show that. In the bottom of this page, I added in the net impact of the school tax levy credit. So up higher on the page, if you have that average $350,000 home, you're paying $2,338 in school taxes. Once you knock it down with the school tax levy credit on your tax bill, it's closer to $1,877 that you're actually paying in school taxes. So it's just important to note that if we start talking operating referendums or capital referendums or scenarios or hypotheticals, we have to keep this into account with everything that we talk through, because there is a substantial knockdown to that. Again, in talking to my colleagues, our feeling is this may become the primary source of funding schools. And I put that in quotes because none of the dollars come to schools. It goes on a back end knockdown to the tax levy. Just like state aid does, it also knocks that down. But the feeling is there because this would help make it look like districts are levying much higher from year to year, because that $325 per student would all go on the tax levy, kind of showing the middle part, but then it would be knocked down through the school tax levy credit through higher funding there to kind of equalize that impact. So it's going to become a very challenging, and I think probably I've already lost some of you with that, but just a challenging message to get across because it's almost a shell game of how the funding works with schools. And this is called school funding, but again, none of those dollars come to schools.
Is it kind of a shell game, or is it a shell game?
It's a shell game, yes.
And you referenced earlier, because I don't want to lose this point, you talked about voucher schools and the funding of voucher schools. Can we just unpack that one just a little bit more? When you talk about the money that comes from the state, the legislature blends the money that goes to voucher schools and the money that goes to traditional public schools, correct?
Correct.
And so what I like to say, board members, community members, is that if the legislature is interested in funding a second school system, the voucher system, that's their prerogative. That's their decision. But what's happening right now is that they're forcing the two systems to share the same amount of money. So if the legislature is interested in funding a voucher school system, by all means, go forward and do it, but then don't make traditional public schools have to reduce its money in order to fund that system that they've decided from an ideology standpoint that they want to forward. That's the challenge that we're facing from a revenue perspective. Is that correct?
Correct. And like school tax levy credits, it's difficult to track and follow where the dollars are flowing. And that may be intentional also within the voucher funding mechanisms that are currently there. As I mentioned before, as we discussed the state budget with legislators, a common theme, we discussed this with all of them, is just do a straightforward payment to the voucher systems. And again, get us out of that business of being in the middle within that. So just be more transparent with it as we try to be, internally with our finances also. Okay, so with all that in the mix, we then go to, I think it's page 4, where you'll see the impact of, so it's page 5. Apologize, I won't go any more pages after this. So the net impact of everything I've just talked about puts us at a slightly lower shortfall position at 7.126 million as compared to 7.2 million. And that's just a variable. For instance, we didn't know the voucher expense that we'd had to put into our budget until October 15th. So it's those types of changes that impact that number just a little bit within that. So I think that's what I had ready to present. With that, I'm ready to take any questions from the board, and then we're going to ask for action to approve the budget and certify the tax levy.
I'll come around that one. Mr. Brennan, can you go back off? I have a question to begin. I went back and looked at my taxes that I've been paying on my home since I think the city of Wauwatosa goes back groups of 10 years. There's often conversation in the community about taxes going up. And there's a variety of things that happen. There's a large scale, like reassess all homes that happened right around the time that the previous referendum occurred. Is what I'm seeing here, the tax rate per $1,000 is that on a held constant on a $350,000, actual taxes are decreasing over time, right? For a whole variety of reasons. Is that accurate or not?
So it's accurate and I guess not. So if everything holds equal and your property values increase at an equal rate with the rest of the city's properties, both commercial, residential, you'll then pay a 2.62% increase to your school taxes, the way it's shown here before that school tax levy credit knocked down. If your home, and you're comparing a $350,000 home last year to this year, same valuation, then the tax rate on that home would have dropped by 3.48%. So they're both accurate, and they're both common ways to look at how the impact is on those average homes. If your home was worth $350,000 a year ago, it's probably worth something more than that today. So you're probably looking at something closer to that 2.62% increase on your own tax bill. But again, knocked down by that school tax levy credit, which was shown below.
Questions and comments?
As you're contemplating questions, you may not have any, because this has been a long process. We've been at it and discussing it candidly since February, when the legislature came together and started building the biennial budget. That work ranges from the legislative advocacy committee. Mr. Brightman and Ms. Ellis deserve a lot of credit. We met with legislators, I believe it was late March, early April, where we met with them and advocated in conjunction with the city of Tulsa. I know Mayor McBride was at our legislative breakfast as well, sharing our concerns around school funding. And what was concerning at that legislative breakfast is that our representatives shared with us that they don't feel that they're being heard at the legislative level. That was shocking for Mr. Brightman and I to hear that they feel as elected legislators that they're disenfranchised in the process. I share that because I think the one constituency that will gain the attention of legislators are parents. Their community members who strongly advocate for public schools. You may recall in June, when after the biennial budget was confirmed, some of you were not happy with the legislature. I shared with you at that time, I still hold on to this opinion, that we shouldn't be upset with the legislature. They have shown us who they are. They have shown us who they are. They're not bringing more revenue to public schools. The way that the current funding formula works is that if a local community wants to preserve certain programs or systems, that you are forced to have those local conversations through operating referendums or through some type of facility referendums. That's where the legislature has led us. We know that we had to go into our healthy fund balance to ensure that teachers were compensated appropriately. I'm glad we did it. Let's not forget, I think it was August, when the insurance renewal came up, that you used some fund balance to make sure that the impact of the insurance increase was not felt as much by employees. You had to do that with our healthy fund balance. The legislature isn't helping you as a school board. So Mr. Brightman unpacked a lot, but I think it's been a journey that we've been on from a budgeting standpoint since February. So now we arrive here on October 30th, and you may have limited questions because you've been along with us on this journey, but it's the last thing I would just add is this. I know there's a lot of conversation in the community in regards to, well, we thought there wasn't a fiscal cliff, and now you're telling us that you have financial problems. What is it? Which one is it? we are dependent on the state legislature. The state legislature is creating the fiscal challenge that we're facing, not the 7 members here as a school board, not the administration. It's the legislature. If they are not keeping up with inflationary increases to operate an essential service like public education, then you are forcing us to have conversations that we would prefer not to have. Candidly, I would prefer you ask us hard conversations about how can we improve summer school instead of discussing how will we keep our budget the way that you want it to be, so we can keep all the services you want. The last thing I'm gonna say this again, I'm gonna share it now. My first community meeting was at Madison Elementary School. And the question from that staff was, where's our new school? Where's our new stuff? This community built 4 new schools, where's ours? And as the superintendent, I can't talk about equity and then have such disparities in terms of what one school looks like versus another. That's wrong. But when we have a legislature that's not giving us enough funds where we can put ample money into our Fund 41, which is our capital improvement line item, to keep all of our buildings aesthetically appealing and to make them modern learning environments. If that's not happening, then it's actually forcing us to have these very uncomfortable conversations. So again, maybe I'm just giving you some opportunity to think, but you've been along with us for this journey since February. No, I just want to thank you.
Mr. Meyer, then Dr.
My position is that I agree that we need to spend. I believe from my position, we are in a very risky situation here that we use up all of our fund balance before we identify what our permanent revenue source is. And combined with that, in tandem with that, our permanent cost structure. This risk is not acceptable to me. We have to make very important decisions in a relatively short term so that we don't use up all of our fund balance and have to start borrowing in order to sustain ongoing operations. We are not there yet, but I am, with respect to my board seat, far more risk averse than what this budget is doing with us. We have not run out of money yet. But as Mr. Bretton has said, we only have so many cycles left to go before we have to identify a revenue or realign our costs. And so again, I want to emphasize, I agree with the spending, but I don't agree with spending before we're more certain about where the revenue is going to come from or what the community wants to do with respect to our costs. Thank you.
I want to say that I hope that the community realizes that this is a difficult budget to vote for because it's asking us to, it's a very transparent process. I thank you both for that. It's very clear, the data is there, it's very helpful, but it's asking us to, I think pretty much what Mr. Meyer said, it's asking us to make some really hard decisions of using and dipping further into our finances. At the same time, I remember you talking about how even though we're doing that, we're still in a better place than many, many other school districts in the state and possibly even this country, which doesn't mean that we should sit back and wait and wait and wait, but it does mean that voting for this now does not put us immediately in jeopardy, but it does, as I think Mr. Meyer said, it kind of means we have to now make the next step. But I'm really happy for what we're putting our funds into. I think it centers our students. I think it respects and values our staff, and the leadership in this district. And I think that we just have to understand that it's not a vote and then walk away. We have work to do. We support this budget, we have a lot of work to do, but it's work for our students and it's work for our staff. Thank you for really helping us through this process this year, to both of you. Making it clear and transparent and opening more space for community understanding.
From the perspective of someone who may not be completely familiar with the numbers you showed us and some of the content there. Is that good?
The lights on.
No.
Just talk a little louder into it.
It's not working. So coming from the perspective of someone who may not be completely familiar with the content in this report, do you think that holding something similar to kind of a public forum regarding the budget and the calendar and the financial calendar would kind of increase the transparency with the community and kind of build trust and allow the community to maybe share their findings and their concerns?
Yeah, that's why we put together the calendar for this last cycle, throughout this last year. And we did embed 2 budget hearings this last year with community input. Plus we had all the board items. I think we had 11 public sessions where the budget was discussed over this last cycle. And I expect, given the magnitude of the shortfall and the discussion tonight and previously, that we'll have even more opportunities over this next cycle. November starts our next cycle, planning into the 24-25 budget cycle. And we'll have, I'm sure, a lot more process around that one and a lot more decisions and creativity come around with that one too. So.
Yeah.
Hello. I feel like another thing we should keep in mind is I feel like it should be more public. And I feel like a lot of the things, not a lot, but an example of one of the things I feel like funding could have been used less towards is the phone caddies at the high schools. Because I don't know how much, I'm assuming thousands allegedly were spent on those phone caddies. And in all of my classes, not a single teacher has enforced using the phone caddies. And throughout the entire school, I've not had one friend tell me, hey, I've had to lock my phone up in this phone jail. Not a single student. So I just feel like if we put our money to things like that aren't in use, that could be a potential reason why we're having this conversation right now. And why we're going back to the drawing board, wondering what we can change. I feel like that's the thing that we can change because it's not really beneficial to the students, in my opinion.
To further that, a lot of teachers at my high school have complained that the foam plastic boxes are a waste of space and take up bookshelf space. And I feel like maybe we could use that money towards buying more books for the library or other things that could have been used to students, because we already have the pocket caddies and those are doing the same thing, because the main issue with students and their phones is their unwillingness to put them up. It wouldn't matter if it's in a plastic box with a key or if it's just in a little holder on the wall.
I feel like this is the moment where the kids ratted out the parents.
May I say that you just articulated the principle of return on investment and well beyond your years. Very relevant comment, and keep it with you for the rest of your lives. Return on investment. What do we get if I spend this money? Thank you.
I'll bring up one thing, Eric. I think all of you students are right. And I think some of the big things that our community has to recognize is that in this budget, there's a lot of things that we hope won't hold true for the future. for the long term. Those practical things, removing things that don't have a good return on investment, are wise things to have. But we do have a lot of things within, I'm sure you guys are all the benefactors of, as well as the community. We have high value teachers. We have facilities in place. We have things that are there that this community asked for. And in order to keep and maintain those things, we have to be able to approve budgets that do have the tough things. I'm not saying spend money we don't have. And I know, Mr. Wright, and you've gone over some of the pieces of, we only have so many cycles. We only have so much time. And Mr. Myers pointed out, we can't wait 2, 3, 4 cycles because it won't be here. If everything for the community's sake, people talk about the numbers and the transparency. If everything stayed the same from this last 2 years, over the next 2 years, we'd be in worse shape. And then for another 2 years, we're shaping, to Mr. Myers' point, we're in the bucket. We're now in the red. And we don't have time to wait for that. And as Mr. Myers just pointed out, that clock is ticking. The task force is doing what they're doing. They're going to bring their findings. And we don't know what all those findings are going to be. And I think I've responded to a lot of emails and phone calls today alone that those findings could be met with hostility by the community, by this board. There are things that we're probably not going to agree with. There's things that we are probably absolutely going to disagree with. But the community, and it's up to all of you guys, everybody that's here and everybody that's online and listening, I'm glad that you stepped up and sent the number of emails and made the phone calls and spent the time to say, this is what we like, this is what we dislike, this is what we need, this is what we require. Because our school district, I think everybody here tonight has said, has a standard. We're not some of the other communities around us when within 40 miles. We have a higher standard. Our students sitting here show us and tell us all the accolades that we had at the beginning of this meeting. Let us know that we have a higher standard, which means we have a higher expectation for our students of colors, for our students with, regardless of their needs. So in order to have those things, we have to be able to fund those things. And whether it's a March on Washington or March on Madison, we have to have the voices of all the parents, all the teachers, all the committee members to go and be able to say, I will wield my pen as my sword, and we're going to ask for these things. We're going to make these demands. So that way the board's not making decisions that feel like they're not or less transparent, because we are trying to speak on and advocate on these four's behalf, as well as everybody in this community's behalf.
So if I may interrupt again, when you all get to college someday and you're looking at the course catalog, you're trying to figure out, oh, this business class, finance, has all those fancy terms. Well, it might be for you because you figured out return on investment here. And that's what finance is about. So you have some good aptitude for it.
I might have wanted to hear Mike, because I did see we had a credits for financial literacy in our program. A lot of schools don't have.
Okay. Business finance, remember that something.
As we move forward, I think we need to really clarify a really strong and thoughtful strategic plan. We talked a lot tonight about our values and priorities in terms of academic rigor, setting our expectations, having a strong curriculum, moving forward. Dr. Moons arrived 2.5 years ago. Sure. With the charge from the then board, look under the hood, look at everything that we're doing, and let's be excellent. And how do we put our financial resources, our human resources to accomplish those things? We are in the next step of that path. There's conversations about Dr. Baines and I went back and forth last year, my frustration with the legislature. And people were saying, well, we were hoping for something that was never going to happen. I think the legislature has shown their cards. I think the reason that so many school districts, that I've never met one in Phoenixville of all places, I think their ask was like $500 more per year than we were. That school districts around the state of Wisconsin were universally saying, if there's a moment to invest in public education, this is the moment. We will never be in a better place financially than right now. So it was less hope and more such clear logic of the values of the state of Wisconsin. The birthplace of kindergarten, the place where public education is so across the aisle of value. But of course, the legislature would invest, and yet they did not. And so we have some choices now to make as a community. And we're going to have to figure out where do we divest from? Where do we invest? What do we do in terms of referendum or not? And what are our priorities? When I'm reading things about neighborhood schools, I'm sitting a block and a half from one of those neighborhood schools, and they're very clearly a huge value in the community. And so I really want to invite all the parents online here tonight to continue to engage, to continue to manage answers and expectations, to ask questions, to provide recommendations, because we're gonna need to all figure out how to get through this together and both set higher expectations for our legislature and determine as a community the types of expectations and what we need to move towards together in the next 2 years. Mr. Meyer, what you kind of articulated really resonates with the budget and what we're putting money into. I really value this support. I have increased anxiety of whether or not what's our shift, and it's probably a combination of additional revenue and changes in how we're budgeting. And I think we've probably got about 15 minutes after we adopt this budget as we begin start working on next year's budget to really continue to roll up our sleeves with Mr. Brighton and Dr. Needs and others to think about what we're doing. That makes me think about the board engagement sessions that will be starting soon. As we go out and engage with the community, find out what our values and priorities, we really encourage folks. I want us to really highlight, not to be frustrated with community members who are asking difficult questions, but to not turn on each other, but turn towards each other and figure out how we do this together. That be curious. I'm gonna assume that no single person has all the answers. Good ideas are gonna come from lots of places.
And please, if I may, I want to highlight in January 2005, the board voted to close Wilson School. Not that many years later, the board voted to build a new Wilson School. Any outcome is possible. The community needs to decide and needs to find the money. And so that's a perfect example. It can go from one extreme to the other. What does the community want and what will the community fund?
Any final comments on the board? No? Ms. Summers, please call them.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Lewis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
No.
Dr. Jessup Baker?
Yes. The budget passes. Next up is a Finance and Resource Committee report. Who's got this?
Our meeting was on October 11th. Much of what we discussed, we just kind of went through in this meeting. There was not a financial report ready yet, but that will be posted for the November committee meeting. We reviewed the third Friday student count, including resident enrollment, open enrollment, and tuition waiver students. We looked again at the self-funded health care plan, and that is continuing to run about 13% higher than what we anticipated. Mr. Brightman and his team are going to continue to look for creative cost-saving options for the district, and hopefully start that process a little bit earlier next year, because our healthcare plan it starts October 1st, not January 1st, so it's weird about our district. And then we looked at the budget calendar that Mr. Brightman just had up. We will start looking 2020 next year's budget at the November meeting, which will be on November 8th at 10 a.m. And the School Safety and Security Division will be giving us their update at that meeting as well.
Questions from the board? Thank you both very much for your work on this. Next up is number 7 on the governance, second reading and/or action to approve policy 5120.0.
It is recommended that the school board approve policy 5120.01, assignment within district for non-resident students, and I so move.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any additional information on this item before we take it?
If I could just say, there was no request for changes from this group last time. We have made no changes since last time.
Seeing no comments or questions, please call roll.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Emerald Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Dr. Jessup Baker?
Yes, that item passes. Our last item on our public agenda this evening is a task force 2075 update to the board. Mr. Brian, are you?
As Tim's technology leader is pulling the presentation on, we thought that this would be an ample, appropriate time for us to just review what is the purpose of the task force, and what are the needs that we're trying to address, what's the why behind the work, and to move forward and giving you an update on where we believe the next steps are. So thanks, Tim. You out of the way so we can see all the. So what's the why? The reason why we have commissioned this task force is because I think it's been mentioned here earlier, we know that we have a 2-year runway. We have a 2-year runway to currently use our fund balance to sustain who we are right now. There are other school districts across the state that are having deep conversations around making significant cuts to their current operation. We know that we have a 2-year runway, so we want to best position our district for the future. The board approved a strategic plan last year that is, I believe, very ambitious. And it puts a stake in the ground of wanting higher academic achievement. That feedback came through our listening sessions and the feedback that we received through this process of developing the strategic plan, where the community said, we think we can do better, that we should do better, and our kids deserve better. And then finally, we're involved in this work because we have a fiduciary responsibility to long-term planning, both from a facility maintenance standpoint and for our financial stability perspective. If we're not having these long-range conversations, then we're in essence kicking the can down the road. And that has been done here in the past. We can't continue to operate that way and call ourselves strategic. And so it's really important that we have these discussions. You'll see on the bottom here that our vision statement of ensuring an exceptional student experience for every student is what we strive for, that we want to eradicate inequity. We want to eliminate disproportionality and see proficiency for all. That's our vision for every child in this district. So what are the needs? Most school systems would approach this work by really focusing on that last box of the long-range financial planning. We've taken on the bigger needs of 3. We believe that we need to look at our current enrollment strategy because you have received our projected resident enrollment work. MD Roffers has given us a projection that our enrollment's going to stay steady, if not slightly for the next 10 years. That's good news. We understand that we are also the largest participant in the open enrollment program than any other state or any other state public school district. And so we have to take analysis and review on where we are in that program. We have to do long-range facility planning. That there is continued deferred maintenance 5 years after a very successful and a very important facilities referendum that passed. I think everyone should continue to be proud of that work. But the work didn't end at the conclusion of that referendum in 2018. And then obviously we have to do long-range financial planning. And Mr. Brightman and I are going to tag team this. So if there's anything you want to add at any moment, let me know. So when we look at our current enrollment strategy, as I mentioned, we're the largest participant in the open enrollment program than any other district in the state of Wisconsin. We know financially that participating in open enrollment is having financial diminishing returns. Let me pause and be very clear that our financial analysis of open enrollment is not an indication or an evaluation of the students in the program, but the financial analysis of it is real, that we receive $8,700 for every student who attends our school system through open enrollment. But the cost to educate a child in Wauwatosa is how much, Mr. Bright?
About $12,000.
So we receive $8,700 to educate an open enrollment student, and it costs in the neighborhood of $12,000 to educate a child here. So.
And what do we receive for a resident?
It's a loaded question because there's a multiple front. So on a revenue
Well, kind of,
authority,
sort of.
revenue limit, it's 11,019. But our cost to educate, we have other revenue sources and other state aids and things that factor in, but
But there is a difference,
yes.
significant.
There's a significant difference with open enrollment.
Yes.
Yes. And so again, I think there's been this analysis or evaluation of the district. Dr. Needs having an evaluation of open enrollment. From a financial proposition, I have concerns in terms of how this is impacting our school system, in that the state is not giving us the right amount of funds to educate children. If it's $8,700 that we receive, but we're in the neighborhood of paying $12,000 to educate every child, there's a gap. And that gap is a financial, it's having a financial and adverse financial impact on us. Then there's a second question in terms of if we continue to participate in the program or if we don't participate in the program as much, does it represent our values? And some people in the room will know this, some may not, but let me be very clear. I humbly submit, I don't think there's any advocate for the Chapter 220 program in the state of Wisconsin that is stronger around that program than me. The Chapter 220 program was a program that was race-based in terms of admission. Open enrollment is not a race-based admission program. So in other words, when students apply for open enrollment, we have no idea who they are or where they're coming from. We could receive an open enrollment application from a white student from Menominee Falls. We don't know that for sure. So when we talk about the cultural value of open enrollment, I think we've benefited from the fact that we have a high number of students who apply to open enrollment that come into our district who are students of color who live in Milwaukee. But we can't guarantee that that's who's going to apply through open enrollment every year. I think we had an opportunity as a state to advocate for children of color, specifically from Milwaukee, to ensure that they had access to high quality educational opportunities in places other than their home district of Milwaukee, and vice versa. For residents of suburban districts to go into Milwaukee, we had a chance to advocate for that, and we didn't advocate as a state as strongly as we should. That program, we talk about the ability for students to get to school on time. It provided transportation, it provided tutoring services. It was a strong program. And we allowed the legislature just to slice it away. So I want to go on record as saying that my analysis personally, our district's analysis of open enrollment is not an evaluation of the value that the children bring to us through that program. It is simply a financial valuation. And so what we have to decide is, knowing that we've received good news, and the good news is that we know that we're going to have stable to a slight increase in our resident enrollment over the next 10 years, we have to decide what is our enrollment strategy moving forward. Do we continue to stay in a program that we know is having diminishing returns financially, or do you reframe how you move forward? There is no judgment, but that's the first of three questions we have to ask. Mr. Brightman, I will answer any questions.
Quick question for you, Dr. Manzer. How many students do we have, do you know, that are still remaining in our school system on Chapter 220?
One. That student will be graduating from Wauwatosa West this June. Then we are officially done with the Chapter 220.
I have a question just about the cost to educate a student. So we say it's about $12,000 to educate a student. We get $8,700 from the state for students. But what is the actual cost, right? Because the $12,000 would include like the teacher's salary, which isn't gonna change whether there's a resident student or a non-resident student, right, taking out, you know, furniture, books, curricular material, right? Like, isn't that all factored into that 12,000?
Yeah, so open enrollment, the financial side, it's intended to fill your existing capacity within kind of your resident student base. I think someone's might be on, maybe. And so part of what we looked at with the task force, and we went back and forth with the task force on what to include, what not to include as far as relevant costs. For example, we had at one point kind of the legacy costs for teachers' retirement benefits for those teachers. We decided that wasn't an appropriate cost to tag onto the open enrollment side because it wasn't directly related. So we've had some back and forth on the financial analysis of this, which I think was healthy dialogue with the task force and internally too, with all that. But very much it's fill your existing resident capacity is the intent. You may have 2 or 3 seats per section, per school, however that filters through. We've done some analysis on current year staffing plans with and without non-residents, with and without higher and lower class sizes, and kind of looked at things from different angles within that. And so that's just part of the work of the task force and reacting to their questions and giving them more information as we look at these
That's
things.
part of the process. And again, this is not an attempt to place blame anywhere, but I think people are asking us very pointed questions through the task force process. What's emerged through the discussions is that we know that we've created 13 sections, additional sections in our elementary schools as a result of open enrollment. And so if you spend, Mr. Meyer talked about return on investment and cost analysis, we've created 13 sections. Please listen to what Mr. Brightman said. The idea of open enrollment is that you're supposed to take students where you have available seats, not to create new sections. And so I think the financial challenge that we're finding is that we've created these costs instead of finding seats where the students would appropriately fit. And I think that's what I mean by the diminishing returns. The additional information that has emerged through task force questions have been questions around the level of academic support students receive and the disciplinary rate and academic performance. I think that's more qualitative in nature, but people have weighed in on it. I believe that we have to center ourselves, at least with this open enrollment conversation, on the financial side of it. And what's the financial decision? Now, the second question, I had a really good conversation with the board member who said, the financial conversation is fine. What about the value component of it? What about that piece? I think that's a community conversation. And the community may say, we understand that this has diminishing returns and we're still okay with it. And we're okay with you creating 13 sections because we believe in this program so much that we're willing to pay for it. And if that's where this process is going to land us eventually, then the community is going.
So understanding that these 13 sections were created, I mean, that wasn't just overnight. Is that like building Wilson and Lincoln and adding more classrooms? Like, I don't understand, like, like, where did those 13, sections come from?
I think so. Great question. I think these are the things that we've inherited, that we found through our auditing over time. We have 1,096 open enrollment students in our district. And that's a lower number. At its height, we had up to 1,300 students. Our open enrollment population represents about 16% of our overall population. That's large. In certain schools, it's 1 out of 5 students are open enrollment students.
Certain schools.
In certain schools.
One out of 2, right? Underwood, the traditional Underwood is 50%. So I just wonder how, and just Underwood, not Easton in mind, just Underwood itself. So how do we sustain these programs if we don't have non-resident students? Like, how do we sustain buildings like that?
I think there are school systems, school districts that have sustained low or small, I will use the word small schools in their communities in the name of we want to keep our schools open. And so I think this concept of we have to take open enrollment students to keep our schools open is a fallacy. I think that was something, that was how we justified keeping the school open in the past. What I'm suggesting to task force members and to the community is to say, well, there isn't any rule that says you have to take open enrollment students to keep all your schools open. It just may mean you're gonna pay more in order to keep the schools open.
I guess just one
And,
more
and I
point.
guess to answer your other question, because I'm avoiding your question, and that is, I think there was I shouldn't say a thing. There was a strategy in this district for years that said in order for us to keep our footprint, we're gonna take open enrollment students. But what didn't happen over time is someone didn't say, well, wait a minute, what's the financial analysis? Are we reaching a point of diminishing returns? What Mr. Brightman and I are telling you is that we have reached a point of diminishing returns now. And so there was a time period where this was a very appropriate and very shrewd strategy to keep the footprint open. But we've gone past that now in terms of it continuing to be viable.
And just one more comment, because we got data on student demographics, I think of the current, non-resident students, is that correct? So do we have data to tell us what years past, what they look like? Because I think, and what the community is saying, that an indirect consequence of open enrollment is that it does diversify our student body. I mean, when I look right here and see that Black or African American students make up nearly 45% of our non-resident students, it begs me to ask questions around our adult practices, right? So we know that we're inviting students from different cultural backgrounds, and DPI Tom, I believe, did a really good presentation on how, as our demographics are changing in suburban communities like ours, our adult practices are changing to meet the cultural needs of our students, right? So when you talk about academic data and behavioral data that might not, especially related to our non-resident students, I want to know how we're considering their cultural background, right? Because we're talking about culturally relevant pedagogy and practices. So how are we incorporating that? And then my last ask is kind of to see, I want to see the numbers of the positive impact that our non-resident students have. We celebrated our West Band today. We're all looking forward to seeing Frozen. Wauwatosa East football has finally had a winning season this year. Like, how does taking away open enrollment seats impact some of these things that this community highly values? And I'd like to see some data around that.
Well, first, Dr. Means, here I thought I was going to be the first person to ask a question and you beat me to it. So that has to do with keeping all of the buildings open. What would that cost? So 20 years ago, I was one of the lead architects of the expansion of open enrollment to keep all 9 elementary buildings open. I further supported an additional expansion of open enrollment to avoid layoff of some 36 teachers about 10 years later. I really truly am one of the original architects of our whole open enrollment program back when those first decisions were made. Now, that said, this is just like anecdotal in my mind, but I really think it costs more to educate a student now. We have so many more mental health needs. Maybe we had those mental health needs in the past and didn't know it, but now we expect to be able to fund services to meet those needs. And that difference between the aid for a resident student and a non-resident student has become more important and maybe unworkable. I see our job is that, there's 3 legs on our table. There's education, there's ideology, and business. And I tried to focus on business, and it's cold and heartless, but we have to have the money in the bank account to write checks. So how do we get there? And so the scenario, I know we're just talking about 2075 and the board's going to have to make decisions in May. We don't have a lot of time, folks, right? What I would like to see the economics costed out of eliminating open enrollment as a means to keep elementary buildings open So we stopped using these kids for that purpose. But we keep all 9 elementary buildings open. The idea of what are the building, like keep the lights on and the heat going and the maintenance, the savings of closing an elementary building is surprisingly small. And if we presented the community with a referendum choice, I'm not saying I support it because I haven't seen the numbers, because we haven't done, I can't recall anyone doing this economics cost out whole thing, which include comparable if we close elementary buildings now, we're going to have busing costs and all these other things that come with it, transition costs. And so what would the referendum amount be if we told the community we will, as much as feasible, be educating Wauwatosa resident students and not use open enrollment to keep buildings open, but we will keep 9 buildings open. So the community will need to fund that, so we don't have to have the civil war that will come figuring out which buildings are going to close and where the boundary lines are going to be and all that stuff. And maybe perhaps the open rooms in those elementary buildings be used to lease for daycare services for preschool children or something that would bring in revenue, that would utilize the building. I couldn't see bringing in any kind of adult service because now we got to deal with mixing children and adults. But if the services we lease them out for were for children, we already have the security set up. We have the, the vetting of the staff, everything like that. What would the bottom line look like for funding something like that?
I think that's scenario B. So if people go out to the Tulsa 2075 webpage, I believe scenario B is keeping all the schools open. And we will never, I want to be very clear, because we've had this conversation at the task force as well. We can never eliminate ourselves from open enrollment. I mean, it's a statewide program that we are obligated to develop a formula. And then Ms. Zelazowski and Mr. Pinion and Mr. Bryden and I all come together and we estimate how many seats we may have available. So we don't have the right to just eliminate ourselves from open enrollment, but we can manage it differently. And right now we have leaned in on a strategy that I think Mr. Meyer was it brought a profit to us. And I hate to talk about kids that way by us being a high participant in the program, it helped us. But now we've reached a point of diminishing financial returns. And it's just the financial, because I want to come back to Ms. Willis's statement. And I think Ms. Willis, if you take a look at the district milestones as part of the strategic plan that the board approved, under milestone 10, it lists out participants in clubs, sports teams, and activities. And that our job is to make sure that there's proportionate representation of the district demographic community. So we're able to tell you, I think Ms. White, our data analyst she will have an update, I would say by January, February, of where our open enrollment non-resident students fit into milestone 10. I can tell you it's not where it should be. Okay, it's not there.
And I think that we have other costs that are higher now. 10 and 20 years ago, substitute teachers were not nearly as costly as they are now. We did not have a labor shortage back then for teachers. Yes, teachers were in demand, but now we're finding, we have to pay top dollar in order to compete in the market to hire teachers. And we didn't have to do that before. We had to be competitive, but we didn't have to be right at the top. We could still attract teachers, and that's become a lot harder. So therefore, all the cost structure goes up. And that difference between the state aid between the resident and the non-resident becomes more challenging. Now, I don't know, you'd have to run all the numbers on this. That's a lot of calculations to do here for somebody.
Can I ask a follow-up? So I do want to, I saw Dr. Disabanga, you're kind of referencing the scenario handout. I am wondering, I see dollar amounts listed on this scenario handout. So if we were doing the right sizing our open enrollment strategy, how does that change our budget?
So there's a transition period where like for this current school year, we accepted 64, I believe it was, less open enrollment students, but that doesn't have any impact on the overall system because it's spread across the district. And so that was about $500,000 less in revenue. So that's part of our shortfall is that 500,000. So as you transition out of this kind of thing, it's going to create more of a financial difficulty, but then over time kind of right size itself as we right size, if you use those words, for the intended purpose of open enrollment.
So if we were, I mean, our staffing costs are our highest. That's the highest area where we spend money as a school district. So in order, if we're losing open enrollment seats, potentially up to 13 sections at the elementary level, and then I assume that has some effect on our secondary schools.
Correct.
So how many teachers and staff are you,
Yeah,
in your mind thinking we would have to lose if we downsized our open enrollment strategy?
Yep, we have modeled all of that. I don't have the numbers at the top of my head. I don't want to give out numbers that I think might be accurate. I think at a future time, we'll be bringing this type of information to the board, Dr. Means, I'm assuming. But I prefer.
Yes, I would say yes, and what we've been telling the task force is that, and this is what I understand when we communicated last week, and we did that because we communicated last week because we had a task force meeting on the 24th. The last thing we wanted to see happen is people saying that there's things being discussed about certain school communities and not talk to them first, or at least communicate with them first. I think what we learned is that we're going to find a different way to convey information. But what I would say is that all of this is preliminary in nature, and we are encouraging the task force to be as creative and distinct as creatively as they can. Mr. Brightman and our team, they're costing out all of these different models, but I think that the danger is that when we give data, I think people are presuming that that's a perspective that we want to lean in. We're just giving the information. What I can tell you that if you're asking for an opinion, I have given my opinion. I think that we have reached a point of financial diminishing returns on open enrollment. That's not, but I think there's a part of that where it's not opinion, that's fact. I mean, we realized it. And I think, Mr. Meyer, I was here in 2005.
That's right.
I was here in 2005 when the district was, this board table was confronted with, do we keep our schools open? And after that election in April of 05, the community said, we want to keep the schools open. And so the strategy was, because the gap wasn't that large in 2005 when you take open enrollment students and what we were paying for students. The gap was actually really small. It's just continued to grow over time where I think maybe 8 to 10 years ago, someone should have said time out. Maybe we need to pivot or not, or maybe adjust the strategy. I think it was a good strategy for a very long time, but now in 2023, to continue to use a strategy that we started in 2005 to sustain ourselves just isn't working anymore financially. Now, I want to go back to what Ms. Willis said, because I don't want to lose that piece. That's just one part of the open enrollment conversation. The other part of, but it adds value to our school community. I would just, as a student and strong advocate for Chapter 220, I would just share with you that the Shorewood community in the 1970s, prior to Chapter 220 being the law, they paid. They literally used their money, their tax revenue to bring in students from Milwaukee to come to their school system. There have been communities in this metro area that have said, that's important to us. And that's so important to us that it's not a dollars and cents issue, that we're going to make sure that we are an open, accessible school community. What we've said at the task force committee level, task force level, is that you can do it, it just will cost. And just, we just need to make sure that the community it's very clear that that's a cost that you're ready to assume.
So that goes to something I wanted to ask, which is if and when open enrollment as a program to make much smaller comes to us, could you, even though I know it's more data, I think it might help the conversation to not have it an all or nothing. I know it's not nothing, but a big jump. Could we get some sort of in-between numbers so that we can look at the value, think about how to give our administration the best flexibility on utilizing open enrollment, and also perhaps use it as a way to look towards the future about what else we could be doing to increase diversity and keep it up in our district. And I would mention that, you know, we don't know exactly how these numbers play out because some people who haven't opted to live in Wauwatosa before may decide to move to Wauwatosa. If we make too much of a jump, some people might decide to leave Wauwatosa. So I would like to see some middling grounds on this so that we have some room to accommodate both the financial and the intrinsic nature of this question.
And may I ask yes, and may I ask a favor of the board? Because Ms. Willis said something that I think she has said before, and we have not centered ourselves to have an agenda item. And that agenda item is, we're very quick to have a conversation about what the students are or are not able to do within our school system. But what I heard, I'm trying to use norms of collaboration. And what I'm going to try to paraphrase from what I heard from Ms. Willis was, but let's have a conversation on how the adults are receiving the children and what that has in terms of its impact on the children. I think that's what I heard you say.
Absolutely.
Okay, and so I think so often in the boardroom, we hear these things and then we just keep moving. And so I'm asking for Ms. Summers or Dr. Jessup Enger to just ground ourselves and to have that conversation. Because I have too many discussions with parents, with other educators who are saying, if we want to be the district that we claim we are, which is this very tolerant, open school system, then we have to have that discussion as well.
And if I could follow up with that just briefly, to make a particular group, and the numbers show in the data we have, and you and I talked about this, there's one particular group that would jump down and be impacted by that, African Americans. And to make that smaller in a big way at this point, they're like almost 5%. It was definitely a jump.
Yes.
Would, in my mind, work counter to some of the goals that we have set, meaning that I feel like there's a certain amount of sense of belonging that comes from having a sense of a community in a school district. And so that's where I think about intrinsic, there is value there. And to just go from 17% to 3% or whatever it is, I mean, I'm not stating a number, without understanding some of those losses that could come intrinsically, I think we just really need to be smart about that. And on the side of the discussion around that's come up from the community, and I don't know how much has come from the task force, but what I've heard, you know, around behavior, I think it's really important that our youth, our children, they're like, the one thing I learned as a parent, they're a great thermometer for how the situation is making them feel. And oftentimes behavior is, most of the time, I would say behavior is a reaction to a situation. And so I've been a strong advocate as I came on the board, and I will continue to say that I don't think that we can put 100% of those behavior numbers on the children. This is a full responsibility of the community, of the schools, of everyone who works for the school district. Behavior is a response to the system. And if the system is not working well, we're going to see that coming out in our children's behavior. We're doing a lot to try to address that, but I don't think we should weigh all of that onto something like open enrollment. It's much bigger than that. It's a system, it's a complex.
So I'm going to turn to our student reps. Student reps, my career background is that I was a social studies teacher. So I think one of the disadvantages that I've had as we are navigating this is we're trained as social studies teachers to never allow the class, right, to know what your actual position is. A good social studies teacher, you don't know what position they believe. And so I'm gonna also, yes to everything you've said, but I also want to indicate that there are certain task force members and community members who will say, but the data that we've received around open enrollment students does show trends. And those trends show that disproportionately, they are disciplined at a higher rate, that they require more academic support than resident students, and they're not performing at the same level as academically as students. I want to be fair to all sides. And there are individuals in our community who are saying, when are we going to have that conversation? And then those same individuals are saying, and what's the financial impact on the image of the school system because of, we were dealing with it last year, of video fights. And the news was here this room was filled last year because people felt that there were too many fights happening in our schools. And so I just want to be fair to, because in my role, I have to hear all perspectives. I wish I could just have one constituency. I have to listen to everyone. And just because I listen to everyone doesn't mean I'm leaning one way or another, but it's just, I have to honor all of those. I'm gonna move us forward because of time. And the second area, and I think I wanna rest here for a second. The second area that we're tackling is long-range facility planning. I referenced it earlier. My first community meeting was at Madison Elementary School. And the staff and the parents said, this doesn't feel right, that our school has a higher number of students of color here. And we can look across town and there are schools on the east side who have these beautiful facilities. And that's not what's happening in our building. Why? I've told this story and I know our parents love our schools. And I appreciate the fact that they love their schools. But it bothers me from an equity standpoint that our Cole Award winning principal, Joe Russell, had to install a manual garage door to connect the kindergarten classes together at Washington. Where at other schools, you have these beautiful glass doors where you can just slide them and children can collaborate together. That's wrong. That's just downright wrong. I think at one of our last board meeting on October 9th, there was a parent from Eisenhower that said, so why does our instructional coaches have to live and work out of a trailer? Why is that happening? From an equity standpoint, I'm struggling with how to reconcile that we have an imbalance in our district. I think the work of the 2018-2017 Facility Advisory Committee got us to a certain point. I've shared this story before, but within my first 60 to 90 days, the architects from that work said, demand means you have a problem. And as you know, there were a lot of other things happening within those first 60 to 90 days that said, yeah, we do have a problem. And they went on to say that there's a phase 2 and a phase 3 to this facility conversation. And that the more you continue to delay and defer the maintenance around the buildings of Madison, Eisenhower, Roosevelt, Washington, Jefferson, Whitman, Longfellow, West, and I'm saving this school for last for a reason. And the numbers that are associated with the deferred maintenance for Wauwatosa East are amazing. We have a problem. And so that's the second item that from just a strictly fiduciary maintenance of our funds we have to address. But I love the way that Mr. Meyer said it. In terms of school leadership, we always at this board table have to look at things from a business perspective, from an educational perspective, and from a moral perspective. And I believe from all three of those components, we have a lot of work to do on the facility side of things.
I think something that really concerns me now about the decision process and the public's understanding is, I think the word's conflating. We're conflating the capital needs with the annual operating needs. People come to the microphone and say, we approved this referendum, for 2018 committee, and what did you do with the money? That was a capital referendum. Our shortfall this year is an operating issue. But we also have capital issues that are affecting the 2075 decisions on the operating. So we gotta be very intellectually disciplined and communicate very well what we're talking about, what the difference is, and if we go into the community with a referendum or more than one to vote on, that we be clear what it is each question is asking, what the money is for. Am I okay with this?
You are absolutely right.
Mr. Meyer, can I, because I stepped on the board, you and I are the two longest tenured board members. You were on the facilities committee. There was deep work on this. I
Yes.
stepped onto the board just at the very tail end of that work being done before it was kind of presented back to the board. Do I recall that the last referendum previous to 2018 was like 1990?
Oh, it was, long ago, the early 90s.
It was before the QEO.
Before that, it was before the QEO. My youngest child, who's now 39 years old, was one of the Roosevelt students who was called one of the trailer kids when the addition was being put on Roosevelt, when she was in, I don't know, like first grade. So that's a long time ago.
We are as a community dealing with the results of choices made. And I hesitate to be too much of a Monday morning quarterback of why the choices were made. I wasn't here. But for decades, there was not an investment in the physical infrastructure of our schools.
Correct. We didn't have the money.
And so the boards in the community over and over again, from, I don't know when it was, kind of these beautiful old buildings that we all love. And someone said to me trick or treating, I love Roosevelt. And man, I walked in there the first time with my kids and it's not a beautifully easy building to navigate. Washington, I'm gonna guess there's some Washington parents here probably feel the same way. You love it and it's not exactly what you want it to be. And so we have challenges. And again, we are inheriting what we have and trying to figure out how to navigate it.
Or we don't have challenges. If the community is emphatic and clear and says, no, we love our neighborhood schools, okay, then that means we're gonna have to find a methodology to go to, we can't depend on the state to help us, to have the local taxpayers say, we love our local schools so much that we're willing to pay for this. And we've tried to bring that up and raise that up during our conversation. And it's, you can clearly see there, I think it's scenario A and B, it's there. And I want to be clear, just because one of, I believe, 3 sources of information to the board may not prefer a referendum doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be. We have strategically planned this in a way that you have decisions to make by August 26th of 2024. So that gives us a few months to figure this out. But I just want to land and finish and see if Mr. Brightman has anything to add. I can tell you that our architect will tell you clearly that there's a concern that he has in terms of the conditions of our buildings. On Wednesday, we get our brand new director of buildings and grounds. We're really excited that Kevin, you met Kevin a few weeks ago. We know he's going to do amazing work, but we can't ask him to try to maintain our buildings if we're not definitive as a community on how many buildings we want to have open and what type of learning environments we believe every child should have. I believe every child deserves a modern learning environment. Doesn't mean that every school doesn't have to look like Wilson or Underwood or Lincoln. They don't. But the inequities that we do have in some of our schools just isn't right. And when I look at our high schools, we ask our young people, and I'm teeing this up for you guys to weigh in. Are any of you in launch? Anyone? I went and spoke to a launch class at Brookfield East. And when I compare Brookfield East as a learning environment to what the students have at Waldorf East, That's not right. It's just not right. It's not fair. When I look at the environment, we talked about, we passed the new curriculum for career technical education here this evening. The learning environment at Wauwatosa West on the CTE side is not what we have at Tulsa East. There's a problem. And that's not, even within our district, the fact that the children at Tulsa East have this amazing career technical education learning environment and the kids at West don't. We as a community have to decide what's our standard of care that we want to make sure that we're going to provide every child. And right now, there isn't a plan. And so that's the second of 3 items that this task force and community and eventually board are being asked to address. I'm going to go quickly here. And then the third component is long-range financial planning. I know there's been a lot of questions around, well, what happened to the budget shortfall? I thought it was 7.2, now it's 9.3. Let me be very clear. The $7.2 million shortfall that we referenced was for fiscal year 2024. You passed that budget. The $9.3 million shortfall that we are anticipating for the fiscal year 25 is different. And there's certain assumptions that we built into it. One assumption, I'm just being very clear, and it probably gives Mr. Reitman heart problems, but I want to be definitive. We've already baked into the fiscal year 25 budget a 4% increase for our teachers. We're not going to continue to play games with our staff. I believe in them deeply. I care for them. And so we're putting that into the budget right now. We've also put in that budget a cushion of 4% if the insurance goes up by cost, so we don't have to do what we did in August. So that's been placed in. A third assumption that's in that budget is that we believe that we need to maintain our secondary mental health specialists. We think that we're seeing a decline in behavior problems because we have those health specialists. And so we've embedded that ESSER position in the budget. We believe that we need to keep the 2 individuals, and there's only 2 for our 7,000 students, the 2 individuals who oversee our gifted and talented program. It's hard for me to believe that we didn't have anyone before the ESSER dollars, that we're keeping those in the budget. That all the academic interventionalists, Dr. Wood, you asked the question of, shouldn't we be helping more kids? We always compare ourselves to Elmbrook. Elmbrook is working with the students who are in the bottom 25 percentile of academics. We can only work with the bottom 10% because we don't have enough academic interventionalists. So we believe we need to keep those positions. Those are all positions that came to us through ESSER. So we're going to have to find ways to keep those positions, we believe, in our organization. And that's why that dollar amount is 9.3 versus the original dollar amount. Did I remember all that?
Yep, very, very well. And in the bottom line, revenues go up about 0.27% and expenditures are going up 2.5%. So modest expenditure increase, no revenue increase is giving us an additional $2 million. So that's just what it is.
So just because I know people are watching, Mr. Remy, can you remind me how much more, if we just got the amount Elmbrook got per student, for resident students, how much more money we would have in our budget annually?
Yeah, I'll rerun it after everyone approves their budget like we are tonight, then it becomes public and I can rerun those. When we ran it last spring, it was about $6.8 to $7 million of additional funds we would have with our student count using their revenue authority.
So just because the state in 1993 said, Elmbrook, you're spending more per student, keep doing it. TOSA, keep spending what you're spending. Got baked into 1993. The escalators have been the same for the districts. So they get $6.7 million. If we just got what Elmbrook got,
yes, we
would have $6.7 million. And that's been around that number of a differentiation every year since 1993.
Every year, right.
So, and I'll say that every board since there has what we call tax to the max. Whenever even the conservative Republicans on the board would take whatever tax levy we could levy to not fall farther behind on that base, because you couldn't catch up. once you start, you can lose a step, but you can't gain a step, or you can't catch up a step. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
So every year, that what's the accrued interest thing, right? The compounding interest. Every board, every year, even long before I was on the board, they would increase their levy as much as they could so that they didn't fall behind farther. Same thing, but it compounds. So once we start behind, the behind gets compounded as time goes by. Is my logic correct? Okay.
Correct. And that's why as part of the state budget, they increased that low revenue limit ceiling up to $11,000 as a minimum. So if you were like a Waukesha and you had $10,200 per student a year ago, you effectively got an $800 per student increase under this current budget biennium. It all goes on the local levy. That's the difficult side. But that's the way that works. We were already right at that $11,000 mark. In fact, we're $11,019 with our current revenue authority. So we were just over that. So
I'll go quickly with our next slides, so we can just wrap things up. So what's the process? We've talked about the why, we've talked about the needs. So what's the process? Our task force will put together, you see the orange boxes, that's the work of the task force. When you take a look at the blue-gray boxes, that's the work of our administrative team, the district, and then the dark blue boxes that's the work of the board. And so we've encouraged the task force to come up with hypothetical scenarios. Nothing has been determined by the task force. And in fact, the task force, the greatest power they have is to come up with scenarios, but they're not making any decisions in terms of what's going to actually happen. We have to make sure that we give them the space to continue to come up with their hypothetical scenarios. And that's going to happen between now and March of next year. We're going to work, yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. Is there a way that the community members can engage with folks on the task force, or is it, I mean, it's, I don't want to tell them to start emailing or calling people out because these are volunteers on our task force, but I do feel like there are certain sectors in our community that would like to have their voice heard and things be considered.
So maybe after I go through the entire process, people will feel it differently. I can tell you I've received at least one definitive concern from a task force member of the tenor of the community is starting to concern them. Sure. I want to say even two, in terms of them feeling if they are even safe to do this work in a safe environment. So that's why I'm hesitant to say, I think there's other ways that people can have their voices heard.
I just think as we roll out these different scenarios, people are going to have input, right? Right now, I think we have a lot of non-resident families who would like their voice heard, and I don't know that we have that representation on the task force. So I just ask, as we roll out different scenarios, how do they really capture the voices of our entire community?
So I'm going to get to, hopefully, maybe after I unpack all these boxes, you can tell me.
If I may, there was a committee 20 years ago called the TOSA Committee. It was a similar thing, and there was non-resident membership on that committee. To your point, Ms. Willis, and if we did not do that this time, well, maybe an oversight, but yeah.
I believe the committee was open.
Okay.
No, it was open. And I'm going to get to that in a second.
All right, yeah.
So we're going to continue to encourage the task force to come up with different scenarios. They're going to provide interim reports to the board throughout the process. So our facilitator will come before you in the next few weeks. There will be what we're trying to do, and it's been difficult because this is so complex. What we're trying to do is to have the task force take each of those three problems or challenges of our enrollment strategy, our long-range facility process, and our long-range financial process. We would like to have them do it in a scaffolded way. I think the task forces have told us they would prefer to do it in a more comprehensive way, hence it feeling more messy and complex. So we're trying to meet the needs of the task force. We're going to disseminate surveys, however, throughout this process as well for the entire community. So Ms. Willis, we're going to make sure that the entire community has the ability to weigh in on their opinion on open enrollment. their opinion on our long-range facilities plan or financial plan. So there will be an opportunity for the community to weigh in as well. We'll make sure that the task force review that data, so they're not working in isolation from the rest of the community. We'll make sure that they finalize their recommendations to the board. But then the board in those dark blue areas, you will have an opportunity to review the survey data. You will have an opportunity to have town hall meetings. In fact, this is the first time I can announce it. You will have your first town hall meeting on November 29th. November 29th, there will be a town hall meeting hosted by the board around the issue of long-range facility planning. Nick Kent from our architectural firm will be the guest speaker. He was also a consultant to the district for the 2017-2018 facility advisory committee. He's going to weigh in and give you opinions. I think he can give you a very unfiltered analysis of the deferred maintenance that we have in the district and what needs to happen. What we've tried to do is to create a process where you, the board, can just triangulate the data. You're going to have data from the task force, you're going to have community-wide survey data, and you're going to have town hall data. And so by triangulating the data, when you eventually have to make your decisions, you can say you're getting information from a number of different sources. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
It does, and I just had a question pop up.
Yes, absolutely.
So the gentleman who's doing the architect guy, would he be the one doing the work on our facilities?
He has
reviewed
reviewed
buying a
our
home.
facilities.
Like if I was buying a home, I would never have a contractor come in and tell me what needs to be done, that I'm gonna pay to do the work, right? I would have an inspector come in who's not gonna benefit from doing the work. So I just wonder how that, like what usually happens with that, right?
I'll let Mr. Brightman answer that a little deeper.
Yeah, that's always a fine line because his expertise is extremely helpful. He has the history of the district. He knows the facilities. He knows the needs. He was there for the prior process. I guess we'd have to look at the scope of work, and we're starting to talk with him and his firm about other additional projects and things we're looking at. So that's a fair question. Professional services. So we'll weigh that, I think,
Not that
internally.
I know him or his firm, but like, do we put out other RFPs for that work or?
I think if we get closer to some type of facilities referendum to be transparent and to be open, we would probably do an RFP. So it's just not going to PRA.
Now, the architect is not the construction contractor. The different.
Right, I understand.
Right, I know what you're saying. The problem becomes that the consulting architect on the study learns so much about us that it becomes hard to compete with that gained experience, especially as they've been here before and they already know, for example, well, you know, you have that pool at Longfellow, you have that pool at West, and you did a pretty deep dive on, not the wrong choice of word, deep dive of the pool, sorry. But you know, they know the issues already. So it's tough to compete with that.
So I'll go to the last few slides. So how can the community stay engaged? I think Dr. Hoy made the statement of, we're all on the same team. We all want the same thing. There will be instances where we have differences of opinion. How we arrive at certain things may sound and look different, but regardless of, and I've talked to community members who want to see us reduce open enrollment, and I've seen people who want us to maintain open enrollment. I've talked to people who believe that we need to reduce our school footprint, and I've seen people who would say they want to maintain the same thing. The one constant is that I do believe all of these constituents want the best for Wauwatosa. And so while it may, I can personally tell you it is uncomfortable, it is messy, it doesn't feel good, it is challenging, it is all of those different things. And I would be negligent, and our team would be negligent if we didn't have these discussions. This is hard stuff. And as I've sought counsel from people locally and nationally, they have commented on the fact of, why are you doing 3? different. Why are you looking at your enrollment strategy, your facilities, and your financial planning? And when I unpack it all and share with them our situation, they'll say, the board, your community, and your leadership team have been left with a lot of challenges to figure out. And the one thing that I've learned about Wauwatosa so far is that people want us to fix the things that should have been addressed yesterday. And so the level of patience that people have is really short, and the standard that people want us to achieve is really high. And so we want to achieve those things for our kids. But what it means then is that we're gonna have some tough conversations. I'll go to the last slide to say, just please remember, we put out an all call to our community in May and June of this calendar year. It was an all call. We received over 60 individuals who said, I want to be part of this process. We went, and you can see all those bullet points. We went to the city of Wauwatosa and we had it in their e-blast. We went to the neighborhood association. We casted a wide net. And there was a moment where when we received this, I think it was like 63 applications, people filled out an application. When we received them, I did not feel comfortable trying to vet and to say, well, these people can be on the committee and these people can't. I said everyone should have a voice. There are no recommendations that have been finalized by the task force. I know it is difficult to hear a school mentioned. I believe that this task force is going to continue to come up with scenarios and they're going to ask us to name other things. I want the community to know as we're working through these scenarios, please know that there is nothing definitive. And that ultimately the board will make a decision. I will be candid and transparent. This process was done in a way where I'm hoping that there will be a blend of us making some tough budget cuts in the next year, that there is some level of interest of the board in putting out a resolution for referendum, because that's all you can do as a board. The community has to vote. You don't, the most you can do is to say, yes, let's put this on the ballot. And I'm hoping that the community will support us some way through a referendum. I think I believe that we have the ability to make some cuts. We will make those cuts. But I don't think we can cut our way to excellence. We can't cut $9.3 million and then still meet the standards that people come into this boardroom on a monthly basis and say, we want you to meet that standard. That's impossible to do. So I think there's going to be some sharing on both sides. Mr. Brightman, did I cover it all, sir?
Yeah, we had 12 hours of task force meetings, and this was a great summary, in an hour and a half or so. So I think, without getting too deep into the scenarios and the actual numbers and that kind of thing, you can see it all in the task force website. I mean, we have it all out there that we present to them.
If you go to the last slide, there's a QR code.
Oh, gotcha.
We'll
Yep.
take people right there.
Yep. And we put that out there real time as we have the next meeting. The information's out there so you can see what's being discussed real time. So we're doing our best to keep pace with that.
Maybe this information may have caught some people off guard and surprised. I would hope that now people stay with us and stay informed. Thank you for giving us the time to unpack this. Thank you.
We are at the close of our meeting, ready to adjourn into executive session.
It is recommended that the school board adjourn to closed session pursuant to the Wisconsin statute 19.85(1). Considering financial, medical, social, or personal histories or disciplinary data of specific persons, preliminary consideration of specific personnel problems, or the investigation of charges against specific persons, except where Sharon B applies with, if discussed in public, would likely to have a substantial adverse effect upon the reputation of any person referred to in such histories or data, or involved in such problems or investigations, specifically to discuss an investigation into allegations of misconduct by a school board member, and I so move.
Have a second?
Second.
It is 9:14 PM on the summer school program.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Summer Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
No.
Dr. Jesse Baker?
Yes. We'll take 5. Students, thank you very much for being here this evening. It's great to meet you all. We are back in open session at the Fisher Building. It's 9:39 PM. Dr. Worley, can you read the motion?
Yes, I'm making a motion to provide summary letter and copy of the report to complainants and to Mr. Meyer. No additional action will be taken.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any more comments or questions? I will call them. Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Willard?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Round?
No.
Mr. Meyer? Stay. Dr. Joseph Bender is a yes. It is 9:40 PM. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Yeah, we should go.
Mr. Morris?
Yes.
Dr. Hoyt?
Yes.
Ms. Willis?
Yes.
Dr. Worley?
Yes.
Ms. Heimer Round?
Yes.
Mr. Meyer?
Yes.
Joseph Bender is a yes.